G'day, mate. 40 here. So the most valuable thing that I've learned this week is that fire is not some unstoppable force. It is a process that requires ingredients. But yeah, that's awesome, because so much of life is a process that requires ingredients. I've been hitting a wall on my workout, a quarter, half, 2/3 of the way through my every other day workout with weights, pull-ups, push-ups, and I'm just hitting a wall with unusual levels of fatigue. And it's disturbing. It's like, oh my God, is this how it's going to be for the rest of my life? Am I returning to a life of chronic fatigue syndrome? I feel the walls closing in on me, and there are ingredients to my hitting the wall. And perhaps I'm just not over that flu thing fully yet that I was struggling with 10 days ago. But fire requires certain ingredients, right? You don't provide fuel for fire, and you're not going to have a fire. And I would assume that success, right, has ingredients, that there are clues that success leads. And if you follow the practices of success, you're more likely to have success. And if you're getting fired all the time, all right, you're probably creating a liability for your employers. It's the number one reason that people get fired, is because they're seen as a liability. So I just love that insight from fire prevention, just recognizing fire is not some unstoppable force. Most of what confronts us in life, or much of what confronts us in life, in our personal life, not national politics, is probably a process that requires ingredients. And if we want to turn the tide on some negative habit that we've gotten into, we just probably need to change one or two ingredients. So, for example, knee pain, right? I was often bothered with knee pain, and someone came in and said, oh, if you just do this particular process to loosen up the muscles further up in your leg, then they will stop pulling on your knee and you won't have knee pain. And so I used the roller and I started rolling on top of my leg in front of my knee, and dadgummit, those problems went away. And voice projection, right? I had great difficulty projecting my voice for most of my life. And then I went and took one voice lesson, and the teacher said, try to project from the top of the back of your throat. So where you say, nya, 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 feel that vibration point there, nya, 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 nya. Right, speak from there, and then you'll be able to effortlessly project your voice. Now, it requires more energy. You have to be thinking up to be able to reach and project from that part of your throat. But boom. So decades, I was bothered by my inability to clearly project my voice. And I'd have to get so close to the microphone during my radio days that you could hear like everything that was going on with my mouth. It sounded like I was drowning on the air. And then I was willing to spend, I think, $250 for one voice lesson. But a lifetime of problems with voice projection just went away. So why do people watch a live stream when they could be watching Fox News right now? Well, I think one reason that people often prefer live streams and podcasts is to get real talk instead of great enunciation and presentation and something that feels much more performative, right? With a good live stream and with a good podcast, all right, you get the sense that someone's talking to you. So notice the difference here, where Mark Halperin begins with how TV announcers normally sound, and then he transitions to his regular voice.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the morning meeting. Thank you for joining, Dan Sean.
All right, so that's how you normally get the news. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. That more formal, performative presentation, as opposed to something that is just much more organic. Right? When you listen to Mark Halperin and company, right, you feel much more that they're talking to you.
When it comes to the involvement of President Trump's team, it's been absolutely critical in getting this deal over the line.
Dancing around who gets to take credit for this deal.
No one's dancing around here.
The State Department briefed our colleagues that President Trump was critical in getting this deal over the line. Do you not agree with that statement?
I mean, look, I'm not going to speak to a random person. I don't know who this person is. I'm not going to. Oh. What I can say is Look, obviously Matt Miller will speak for himself. What I can say is there are steps that were taken here that is really important and critical, and that started with this president's.
All right, Sean, we always try to be forward-looking rather than just retrospective here, but what does that say to you?
So there were more technical issues there than you'd get with a professional network news presentation, but the payoff is that you get just more real talk, and you wouldn't get the following real talk on cable TV news.
About how to be White House press secretary. What does that say to you about how to do the job going forward?
Don't be a moron. The idea, like, I know who Matt Miller is. This is not like the idea that you're calling the State Department spokesman a random person. One, shows cluelessness. Two, the idea that it's not coordinated and you didn't know what he was going to say. I would always say to the guys at State, I'm going out to brief. What are you guys saying ahead of time? Is this the message? I'll echo it, or I stand by what State said. The idea that you threw him under the bus shows a complete lack of, so forward-looking, coordinate your statements, know who your colleagues are. He is
pretty shocking that the White House press secretary was not chosen on the basis of competence, right? The Biden administration had 1,000 competent press secretaries that they could have chosen, but they chose instead a black lesbian woman who is incompetent. Just like the Los Angeles Fire Department is led by several lesbians who do not seem to be particularly competent.
Is not some low-level deputy spokesman from some random consular bureau. He is the State Department spokesman. And to say you don't know who a rando is just makes you look incompetent on the world stage. But I would just say this as a side note to the deal. Your description and your analogy is very apt. I think the idea that, part of the reason that Hamas, I think, gave is that they said, wow, Biden's got this deal. If we were looking for daylight between the two administrations, not only one not getting it, but Trump's going to amp it up. We might as well cut the deal now. This is good for America. I actually really do think that the press went a little overboard trying to figure out who got credit. They played into this too much. This was a good deal for America. The idea that Americans are being released is a good day for our country. And the idea that the press corps focused more on who to give credit for and baiting the situation speaks very poorly on them as in their industry.
So I have a friend who's a very smart guy. His father is a professor, and he entered the field of journalism in his 20s. He loved journalism, but he left it because he just thought it was just so inherently slimy and immoral. Because when you're interviewing someone, you're looking for them to say that thing that will get them in trouble and that will be a hook for your story. Often what's best for you as a journalist is worst for the person who you are interviewing. And he didn't like it that he was so incentivized to try to catch people out and to egg people on into saying the wrong thing. And my father had a similar attitude. My father loved journalism. My father wrote stories for various Sydney newspapers. He worked in a newsroom, but he didn't like it that journalism seemed to work on the basis that journalists would take out their interview subjects, take them out for drinks, get them drunk, so that they would then spill their secrets. And so both my father and my friend, they found it just ethically repulsive. Now, this isn't generally most people's experience being interviewed. Most people who are interviewed by journalists report the experience as a positive one. So it's not like it's inevitable that you will regret talking to a journalist. But my friend went on to become a professor of philosophy and a lawyer, and my father went on to become an academic and an evangelist. But I get those, I get that moral quandary that so much of the news media seems to be about baiting people and just cheap point scoring, just trying to get people to say the wrong thing. And it doesn't feel good when your job thrives when you hurt other people, when you bait and trigger other people into making bad decisions. It's like you're a recruiter for the sex industry. Right? Just imagine you're going out there and you are persuading young women to do something that's incredibly self-destructive. That must just eat away at your soul. or if you're selling a product that tends to do a great deal of harm, I would have a hard time working in the gambling industry because of the vast amount of harm that comes from gambling. And if you're living and your success, right, depends upon doing something that's not good, I would think that has to just eat away at your soul. Right, a lot of good insights in this discussion here on Mark Harper's morning meeting.
I agree with you, but what she did and what President Trump did were both unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean,
unnecessary. And
like,
Joe Biden.
I just, like I said, I think that if you're asking what the next press secretary should do, look at how Karine Jean-Pierre has handled her job and do the exact opposite.
Dan.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you guys. And I think, look, if anyone deserves probably the most credit, it's Israel. They decimated the leadership of both Hamas and Hezbollah. And with Assad gone, it was a blow to Iran. And I think Trump coming in did give, Israel some more leverage because I think they knew that things were probably only going to get worse.
So I hate the perspective that most white-collar jobs are scams, all right? I don't like the perspective of looking down at work, looking down at most available forms of white-collar work as dishonorable. On the other hand, I'm not for holding up 15 commandments of righteous behavior at work, and if you ever violate them, then you should quit your job. Right? You may have a job that requires you to tell white lies. For example, you may be fielding phone calls, and your boss, right, doesn't want to take the call, so you tell the caller he's in a meeting right now. He's not in a meeting, he's just dodging the call. Your job requires you to tell that lie, and I don't think telling that type of lie should eat away at your soul. So I'm not someone for impossible standards of perfection or honesty. Your job might require you to arrange treatment for people with a chiropractor, and you may have done some research to recognize that chiropractic is by and large a scam. But if that is your job, right, you didn't light the fire. You didn't start the fire. You didn't start this scam. If you have a white-collar job that calls for arranging treatment for people with a chiropractor, all right, you are not doing something that should eat away at your soul. On the other hand, if your job is incentivized to get people to do something that is dramatically against their interest, then all right, that's different than just going to the chiropractor. Most people who go to the chiropractor are not harmed, but about a third of people who take up gambling are significantly harmed, and the people around them are significantly harmed. So it's the difference between 0.01% of people who go to a chiropractor and get significantly harmed versus approximately a third of people who start gambling and are significantly harmed. Okay, what's going on? Los Angeles mayor faces growing backlash over fires.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass is facing mounting criticism over her response to the deadly wildfires gripping Southern California. More than 140,000 people have signed a Change.org petition demanding that Bass resign. A lot of focus has been on her decision to travel to Ghana despite fire advisories in LA County. CBS's Jonathan Vigliotti asked Bass about that yesterday.
Looking back, would you have taken that trip overseas?
You know, I am going to focus today on what we know.
For more on this, let's bring in Peter Hamby. He's the founding partner of Puck News and the host of Snapchat's Good Luck America. Peter, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
I don't think either of people on this conversation are Trump voters, but even people on the left recognize that neither Karen Bass nor Gavin Newsom are covering themselves in glory.
I'm glad you and everyone you know so far in LA are doing well and are safe. I think this piece that you wrote about Karen Bass is so fascinating because last week when I saw this video of her getting off the airplane and not responding to a Sky News reporter, just asking for basic comments about anything she could say to the residents of LA. I had to watch it a few times because I was just so struck by her non-response there. I know you've talked to a lot of people in Los Angeles where you are, and you've reported on politics for a long time, and I'm wondering kind of what your assessment is and how people in Los Angeles are feeling about her.
The overriding feeling here in Los Angeles, first and foremost, Caitlin, is people are helping each other. I mean, that has to be said. They're like, if you talk to the, anyone, I'm in Venice, I have friends who lost houses. Everyone in the city knows not just one, but multiple people who are affected by this in some way. And people are organizing on their own to bring like Zyn to firefighters and find ways to get baby clothes to people who had to flee their houses and lost everything. That being said, Los Angeles County and Los Angeles City, in the years that I've lived here and all the books that I've read, and my in-laws have told me everything they can to try to explain how complicated government and politics is out here, which makes the blame game usually very difficult. We choose to live in this beautiful place. A lot of people that live in Palisades, Altadena, Pasadena, all the way down to Orange County. You live on the coast, but you also live in the hills in a place that's burned for a very long time. The climate crisis has made fires burn faster, harder, longer, more intensely. But fire is a permanent threat here. And on top of that, you've got many layers of government. You've got the county. You've got the city. Some parts of Los Angeles, where I am in Venice, is part of the city of Los Angeles. Right next to me, Santa Monica, technically can't vote for mayor. And then you've got the Department of Water and Power and commissioners, blah, 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 blah. But Karen Bass, for a variety of reasons, including that video you just mentioned, has come in for singular blame here. It's hard to see politically how she survives this. I mean, there could be a recall here. There's a lot of anger. It requires 15% of the city's voters to sign a recall petition to get that going. But she's up for re-election next year. The big issue, because the mayor of Los Angeles has weaker executive powers than other cities in this country, the one thing you got to do is show leadership and show some sort of political agenda. She knew, we all knew here in Los Angeles from the National Weather Service, on at least by Friday, January 3rd, that there was a real threat here because of the Santa Ana winds and the dry winter, that this could be a calamitous fire situation. The next day, she left. Real quick, though, two big stories just came out in the LA Times that also add to her challenges here. She was told, she was at a diplomatic reception in Ghana having cocktails while the Palisades fire was burning. Pictures of that surfaced on LinkedIn. And secondly, the LA Times reported today, and this is probably more of the fire department's issue, although she's in charge of that too, notionally, that they only had 5 trucks in place. Again, no one here was prepared for how dangerous and intense this fire was, so it's hard to point fingers. But Karen Bass is the person that I think if you talk to any random man on the street, woman on the street here in Los Angeles, they'd be mad at her.
Yeah, and there was reporting, too, to that note, that she had pledged during her campaign not to leave the country if she were elected to this position. So the optics and the politics there are, truly something to behold. I'm curious, too. I mean, I love how you mentioned that everyone in Los Angeles and surrounding areas are jumping in to help however they can and are trying to focus on each other and rebuilding their communities.
LA Mayor Karen Bass is proving to be one of the worst leaders that America has. The mayor promised voters before being elected that she...
It's amazing that these LA fires are a top news story down under.
Wouldn't travel overseas. She told the New York Times, not only would I, of course, live here, but I also would not travel internationally. The only places I would go would be DC, San Francisco and New York in relation to LA. But where was she when the most devastating fires in LA's history broke out? In Ghana. And what was she doing there? She was on a taxpayer-funded trip to attend the inauguration of Ghana's incoming president. Because that's really important, and that's what serving the people of LA really looks like. But this isn't the only occasion that Karen Bass broke her promise. While mayor, she took an overseas trip to Mexico for another inauguration. She flew to Paris for the Olympics. And does Karen Bass regret being in Ghana while LA was on fire, while residents were forced to flee their homes while they burnt to the ground?
Looking back, would you have taken that trip overseas?
I am going to focus today
on
what we know.
But at least she figured out how to answer questions from journalists, because when she was first asked about all this, she just ignored reporters, hoping the questions would stop.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today?
Can you back up? I appreciate it.
Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster?
The scale of the devastation from these fires is hard to comprehend. At least 24 people have died and 23 are missing. The largest fire...
I mean, if you look at aerial views of Pacific Palisades or Altadena, it looks like Dresden after World War II bombing. And if this emergency had not hit L.A., Karen Bass would be considered a leading candidate for governor. All right, so during normal situations, she was able to speak to her constituencies and meet the requirements of being mayor of L.A. sufficiently that she probably could have used this as a launching pad for governor. But sometimes you get a situation or a crisis, a challenge, and it just reveals that you're empty.
Fire in the Pacific Palisades has burned more than 95 square kilometres and is right now only 14% contained. Countless homes and buildings have been reduced to rubble and conditions are expected to worsen. And under Karen Bass's so-called leadership, the budget for the LA Fire Department was cut by $18 million last year, which is actually less than her initial proposal, because initially Karen Bass...
So the Los Angeles Fire Department is the least staffed major city in the United States after San Diego.
Bass thought it would be a good idea to cut it by more than $23 million while making sure there was more money for the Civil and Human Rights and Equity Department so a transgender cafe could go up.
So the biggest challenge with the United States being so intimately supporting of Israel and Ukraine is that it takes away mental space for our leaders and money, budget, that could go elsewhere. And so, too, if a leader puts an emphasis on DEI, they're not using that mental space to promote excellence. And so you normally see that the more companies and leaders support DEI, the less excellent they are. Right? You don't want the leader of the United States spending a great deal of his cognitive capacity thinking about Israel or Ukraine. You want him focusing on the welfare of Americans. And you don't want your leader in business or in politics thinking about DEI and other things that are unrelated to the excellence of the services that they provide. So it's not inevitably that this is a tip-off that someone's not competent if they put a great deal of emphasis on DEI, but it just always seems to work out that way. So in theory, you can be completely committed to DEI and to excellence, but in the real world, from the examples that I see, it's invariably a tip-off that all the emphasis on DEI takes away from an emphasis on excellence.
Which tells you exactly about where her priorities have been as mayor. Now, who was it that endorsed Karen Bass? Former President Barack Obama.
You've always been on the right side of the issues that we care so deeply about.
Thank you.
And I'm confident you're going to be an outstanding mayor of LA.
Oh,
so,
thank you so much.
You know, but as you know, you got to run through the tape.
Exactly.
So we got a little more work to do.
Exactly.
But I'm really proud of you and grateful for your friendship. More importantly, grateful for the service you've rendered.
Remember the hysteria over Barack Obama? Just this like orgasm of delight and joy at the prospect of him becoming president of the United States. He became president, served 2 terms, and he accomplished almost nothing. Obamacare was something that the medical insurance companies were all behind, right? They helped to craft Obamacare. He gave medical insurance companies what they wanted.
All these years and all the stuff you're going to do in the future.
Well, thank you so much. Your support means the world to me, and it means the world of Los Angeles. Thank you so much.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well, the people of LA have not had an outstanding mayor. They have been let down beyond belief. Families have lost everything, while firefighters have been trying to battle fires with no water, which is the result of years of mismanagement. Now, a Change.org petition calling for the resignation of Karen Bass has grown to more than 140,000 signatures. The petition states, despite the tireless efforts of our first responders, the city has been woefully unprepared to ensure the safety and well-being of its residents. Basic resources such as water and emergency services have been inadequate, and leadership has been nowhere to be found when it was needed most.
Okay, let's get a live update here from Fox News.
Issue and the slashing, $17 million.
You know, I think if you go back and look at the reductions that were made, there were no reductions that were made that would have impacted the situation that we were dealing with over the last couple of days.
Well, that is LA Mayor Karen Bass defending the city budget cuts. So there's a big question. Did they hurt the fire department's ability to respond to these massive wildfires? That is a huge question. Plus this.
On my side, on my right side is decimated. Oh my God. Everybody behind me. Everybody, how is...
So the price of your home burning down isn't just the physical destruction of a place where you lived. It's the emotional meaning behind it. I remember how much I loved my first car, and then I pranged it, right? I ran into a parked school bus because I was looking down, changing the dials on my radio. And after I trashed my car, I was never able to summon the same love. But if you love your car and then someone scrapes the bumper, it may well reduce you to tears, because we cannot help but extend ourselves into the world around us. All right. A home is filled with memories. I hope it's a home that's filled with warmth and love. And when you destroy that home, it's like a dagger to your heart. It's not just the destruction of the physical residence, not the destruction of things. It's the emotional meaning that you bring to those things. And those losses are about as real, sometimes more devastating than the loss of physical objects. So if someone cries because the sofa gets torn or a beloved picture is damaged, right? It's not that they're crying over something that's pointless, right? They've invested. We can't help but invest ourselves in people around us, organizations around us, belief systems around us, physical objects around us. You're not an inferior person because you cry at the damage or the destruction of a physical object, right? Why is it that living in this mythical world of the spirit is just inherently superior to living in the physical world? We're physical beings. We are living in a material world. And there's nothing wrong with crying and being devastated over the loss of material objects. And spiritual, godly, minded to be much.
Is this? How could this even be true?
California is getting a gut-wrenching first look at the wildfire destruction. We'll speak with CAL FIRE's Brent Pasqua on what the focus is as residents return home or to what's left of it. Coming up.
Hey. So even in Australia, these fires are dominating the news.
The petition also calls for a full, transparent investigation into the failures in disaster preparedness, response and resource allocation that left LA vulnerable. Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary told Fox Business he believes every taxpayer would like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom gone.
It's not unreasonable to put demands on extensions of help. Right? If you've got a friend who's an addict and who desperately needs help, all right, there are good reasons why people say, well, I want you to enter rehab, or if I'm going to help you here, I want you to change your life there. So let's say you've got a friend who's just staying on someone's couch and they just have no get up and go. All right, you can do everything to try to help them land a new job. But if they're not motivated, all right, there's nothing you're going to be able to do. LA and California have to get motivated to change how they do things, right? Change the ingredients of the processes that are destroying our state.
I think every taxpayer in America, including those in California, would like to tie this aid to removing Newsom and Bass. Now, gone. Part of the deal would be, and I know Trump likes new ideas, here's one, not a dime until those two are whacked from their jobs immediately. They are so incompetent, and all of the decisions they've made led to this, and they're still making mistakes. They're horrific managers. Whack them.
Billionaire developer Rick Caruso, who ran against Karen Bass for mayor in 2022, says this was a disaster waiting to happen.
The brush up in these hills that are controlled by the city and the county, I would bet you that if they haven't been handled, mitigated, pruned, removed for probably 30 or 40 years. This was a disaster waiting to happen. And what's predictable is preventable. And who's paying the price are all of these people in their homes and their businesses tonight. Now, we'll rebuild, but the majority of this community is going to have a tough time rebuilding their lives.
So Los Angeles voted for Karen Bass instead of Rick Caruso. The most affluent areas of Los Angeles, West Los Angeles and the Valley, voted for Caruso. The inner city voted for Karen Bass. Right? We voted for this incompetent mayor of Los Angeles. Right? We made the choices that created this disaster. Right? This disaster required certain ingredients, and collectively, the people of Los Angeles and the people of California made the choices to create the ingredients for this disaster.
Rick Caruso served as commissioner for the LA Department of Water and Power in 1985, and in 2022, he was sounding the alarm that the city's fire department is understaffed.
I've been going around the city talking to firefighters and talking to paramedics. I've been talking to residents, and there's a deep concern throughout this city that the paramedics and the firefighters are understaffed because their budget has not been restored. From 15 years ago, when it was cut back, we have fire stations throughout this city that aren't mobilized because they don't have the staffing to do it, and it's just wrong. My plan as mayor is simple. We are going to restore the budget to bring the staffing levels back, to give the residents of Los Angeles the service they pay for and deserve. And that's the only way a city can be a great city. We have to reprioritize our budget in this city to make sure that our residents are safe and they're protected. And we can't do that unless we have a fire department that is fully funded and fully staffed.
Commentator Megyn Kelly says...
So do you spend government resources primarily to reward people for bad decisions they make? Or do you instead allocate resources to incentivize people making good decisions, working hard, creating businesses, building beautiful homes, and protecting those making good decisions, right? I think we should be arranging government so that we primarily disincentivize bad behavior, incentivize good behavior.
Democrats in LA are going to be voting differently after this horrific event.
But she's woke, and she's like, MK, everyone I know is ready to vote Republican. She's like, everyone I know, all of her woke friends, all of her Dem friends. She was like, we're all talking about how soon we can get Republican leadership into these offices.
Annalise Nielsen is in Los Angeles with the latest.
Look, the latest is the fear is...
So it's not as though vote Republican, you automatically get competent leadership, right? There may well be competent Democratic politicians who will rise up to lead California. But when Adam Carolla, right, applies to work for the Los Angeles Fire Department, he has to wait 7 years before he even gets an opportunity to take a test to become a firefighter, while someone else in a more protected category, some woman, right, she gets tested like a few days after she applies. Who's going to carry you down the stairs if you pass out from a fire?
I believe in 1983 or 1984. And I remember having top down in the car and driving Pacific Coast Highway and playing that song. And my best friends in high school lived in the Pacific Palisades. So I spent a lot of time in the Pacific Palisades. And their house, their family sold it years ago. Actually, they sold it to Burt Bacharach, of all people, who, obviously he passed away, doesn't own it now, but it didn't burn. But I know all those areas that did, and very much about the Pacific Palisades. And it was such a great place. It really was. And with Hollywood and all that, I remember going to dinners with my parents and Frank Sinatra be sitting over there. And my uncle worked for 20th Century Fox, and I saw My Fair Lady filmed. And there was just so much going on in LA, and it was exciting, and it was a place of discovery, and it was a place of innovation. And it was, you look at Neil Diamond, who wrote that song, I Am, I Said, and he says, LA's fine, but ain't home, New York, home, but ain't mine. He says that the rents are low, palm trees grow, the rents are low. And so if the rents aren't low in LA, no. A lot of things he says about LA at the time aren't true anymore, but it was such a great place, but they've ruined it. And they haven't ruined it because the weather went bad. There's been fires forever. As you mentioned yesterday, back to the 1500s, there's always been fires there.
Do you have a memory of the Bel Air fire?
So if you look at much of the Los Angeles Fire Department, right, it's operated by overweight lesbians.
People that know how to solve problems.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, you
can't have some overweight lesbian that says that if you're trapped in the building, you already made a mistake. You already fucked up. You need me to carry you.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, lady.
Fire, by the way, John Campbell, 1961, 464 homes burned. Do you have a memory of that?
I do. I was only 6 years old then, but I do have a memory because it was a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal, and Bel Air was a big deal at the time. And my parents had a lot of friends that lived in Bel Air and lost homes in Bel Air during that time. So I remember that. And usually after these big events, things change because people say, "Hey, we can't have this again. We can't do this again." And
okay, let's check back in here with Fox News.
A view of the Los Angeles Fire Department's budget found that Mayor Karen Bass cut millions of dollars from that budget, which may have had a direct impact on the department's ability to respond to the devastating wildfires that impacted the area. Our senior national correspondent, William Lajeunesse, is live. He's in Pacific Palisades again. And what does Mayor Bass have to say about all this, William?
Well, John, the mayor and her spokespeople say that the cuts that she helped adopt had no impact on the response to the fire. However, that's not what we are told. Now, we are on Sunset Boulevard. Take a look. Every house, both sides of the street, burned to the ground. Now, here's the irony. This is on the same block as a fire station. Now, what we are told is when that call went out for the off-duty guys to show up, and they reported to stations around the city, there were no vehicles available for them to use.
Many of our rigs that are sitting at our supply and maintenance because we don't have the resources to fix them.
That's LA's fire chief last.
Right, that which is exciting is frequently not that important. So promoting diversity, promoting some sexual orientation agenda, promoting green energy tends to be very exciting for some people. But what's important is usually not exciting. It requires a highly conscientious personality. And we know that people on the right, people who are traditional, people who are conservative, tend to be much higher in the personality trait of conscientiousness. People on the left tend to be much higher in the personality trait of openness.
Year begging for more mechanics. Why? When the Palisades fire broke out, every available firefighter showed up, yet many had no pumper truck, engine, or vehicle to use.
We have million-dollar rigs sitting at the yard with no mechanics to fix them.
Many are here, the maintenance yard, where up to 1 in 6 LA fire trucks are broken down, unavailable because the department has no money to fix them.
There's been a 55% overall increase for calls for service.
Compared to other major cities, LAFD is grossly understaffed, far below recommended levels.
We have fewer sworn firefighters today than we had.
Right, PG&E spending a lot more money looking for green energy rather than focusing on safety for their power lines.
2010.
A huge drain on fire resources, the homeless. Last year, LAFD responded to 14,000 fires and 52,000 medical calls.
So most of what firefighters, at least in Los Angeles, do has absolutely nothing to do with fires. So 90% of their job is not fire related. When there is some health emergency or someone needs to go to the hospital, the firefighter who may show up with paramedics, right? Some professional has to stay with them. And so we have all sorts of bureaucratic procedures that direct firefighters away from firefighting and instead place them just doing in the most useless of tasks.
calls.
If we cut one position, if we close one station, if we close one resource, the residents of Los Angeles are going to pay the ultimate sacrifice, and someone will die.
While next year's budget calls for more mechanics and replacement vehicles, the department wants another $5 million for EV charging stations and almost $2 million for diversity.
Right. The more homeless you have, the more 911 calls you're going to have. Right. Socially marginalized people tend to make worse decisions than conventional people. And so you don't want people living on the edge. And when you put them together, when they're living next to each other, when they're homeless, all right, their bad choices multiply, have all sorts of devastating consequences. And so by allowing this enormous homeless population and by not doing enough to incentivize people to lead an upright life, and instead subsidizing people making terrible choices, all right, these things just spiral. And so while we should be using our resources to protect the quality of life for our upstanding citizens, instead we've just gone way off track.
An inclusion plan.
And we are at that breaking point where our firefighters can no longer do more with less.
So in this year's proposed budget, John.
So I suspect that the Los Angeles Fire Department chief is not the best person for the job, right? There are certain jobs that men tend to do better at. There are certain jobs that women tend to do better at. There are certain areas of the economy where people from Southeast Asia, such as India, excel. There are other areas of the economy where people of West African origins excel. There are other places where Ashkenazi Jews excel. If we simply had a more meritocratic society, I don't think that this woman would be in charge of the Los Angeles Fire Department. We'd have someone more competent, and we wouldn't have a city going up in flames.
And they're asking for 227 positions available simply to deal with the homeless issue. Fires, medical.
And if the environment and not damaging the ozone layer is a top priority for you, you really don't want these kind of fires. And you should be willing to sacrifice some environmental priorities for other environmental priorities. If we could have done things to reduce the extent of the damage from these fires, even if they meant not meeting this or that environmental goal, all right, it would have been best for the environment, best for the ozone layer. All right, this is devastating for people's health, for their homes. And if the ozone layer is particularly important to you, this is going to wreck that too.
We are also told that the firefighters on the ground had no idea that that huge reservoir, right, 110 million gallons, was unavailable. And that was going to potentially affect the hydrants, right? And if they did know, I am told they would have hired the...
So how long could a Panda Express managed by 40 last? It's a good question because I haven't had a great deal of executive experience, but I was the editor of my high school newspaper and my college newspaper. And I think I did an above average job. And I don't think I've had any executive experience since then. But people that I went to high school with ended up getting married shortly after high school. And I'm thinking about one of them. He married a woman who earned a great living managing a McDonald's or the equivalent. And so I don't regard working in fast food as beneath contempt. And to me, it's good, honest labor. And so you can make a good living managing a fast food chain, managing a fast food store. And so people just turn their nose up at that kind of work. I don't respect that level of contempt. I know too many people who have built good lives where working in a fast food chain was an essential component of moving from not having a job to a thriving career and family.
Or at least contracted with the private water tenders to be there, so when the water ran out, they had some supply. They, at least on the ground, had no idea.
Yeah, that's that Santa Ynez Reservoir that we were talking about last week that sits just above Pacific Palisades. Out of commission because they were repairing the cover. William, great reporting as always. Thank you, sir.
You got to understand, if you haven't been out there, it literally looks like a bomb dropped. There is things everywhere. And we're trying, our people, along with all of our partners, are doing the best job that they possibly can.
Because there is still so much left to do. The LA County Sheriff describing the devastation its crews are dealing with so much right now, and as they continue to fight these fires. Let's bring in Brent Pasqua, Battalion Chief and Public Information Officer in CAL FIRE Sacramento headquarters. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's get former Republican Congressman here, John Campbell, talking to Hugh Hewitt.
Made some changes after that. But government in California has forgotten a lot of those lessons. LA has been killed by government, which is incompetent, which is woke, and which is corrupt. And those are the three words I would use to describe the governments in Los Angeles and also at the state level in California.
Now, I want people to understand.
There are virtuous cycles as well as downward cycles. And so YouTube has announced it's going to do much less fact-checking going forward. So YouTube is following in the footsteps of Facebook, which is following in the footsteps of X in opening up free speech. So generic Republican, Donald Trump, MAGA supporters tend to be much more on board with free speech than the Democratic Party and much of our academic elite. There's a huge difference between the opinions of regular people and elites in certain areas. One difference is that our elites overwhelmingly support fact-checking and more restrictions on what you can say online. Regular people much more supportive of free speech online.
And you served in the state legislature for how long?
5 years.
So 5 years you were legislating, and so you know firsthand how bad it is up there. And there's supermajorities of Democrats. The Republicans can stand up and shout, but they really get rolled right over. We had good governance until Pete Wilson left in 1998. Unfortunately, Arnold had a glass jaw.
So California's descent into poor governance required certain ingredients, right? The type of people most likely to vote Republican increasingly left the state. The people who poured into the state were much less likely to vote Republican. And so we have changed the ingredients of California. And so we have elected people who are not as competent. And why did we bring in so many immigrants who put as their top priority securing welfare, as opposed to, say, Texas and Florida, where immigrants tend to be much more entrepreneurial and high achieving? So we have in California some of the highest achieving immigrants in the world, but we also have a huge number of low achieving immigrants because of our generous welfare programs. Right? We have put in the ingredients to attract a significant underclass that is not entrepreneurial, that is unlikely to add to the tax base, who is likely generation after generation just to be a drag on the public purse. And why do we have so many of these unimpressive immigrants? Because of the ingredients, the ingredients of generous welfare subsidies. California, instead of spending money fireproofing the state, right, is providing medical coverage to people who are here illegally. And those sort of ingredients incentivizing antisocial behavior means that we've got a huge underclass in California, and people who are the most productive are increasingly moving out of the state.
Couldn't change anything. He was there for 6 years, but it's been Democratic rule unbroken now for 6 plus 8, 14 years of unbroken supermajorities and a Democratic governor. Is there anyone to blame besides Democrats?
No, there absolutely is not. This is all government. Government has taken paradise and destroyed it and ruined it. And not just what we saw the other day, but do you know there's as much oil underneath California as there is underneath Texas? But they don't allow anybody to drill it. What if they did? Think of the jobs.
Landman is just a terrific show. I'm so sad that there are only 10 episodes, but I was hanging on every minute. Taylor Sheridan just cranks out terrific shows. And also watch American Primeval. I finished watching it through for the second time in like 4 days last night.
Think of, and they tax it like Texas does. Think of the revenue they would have. Think of what they could do. But they won't do that because of their worship of this ridiculous climate change theories that they...
Comment in the chat, Chef 40. So have you ever promised something to a mate that you didn't exactly follow through on? So I promised this woman I was going to move across the country with her to Orlando, Florida, in large part because she had a great psychiatrist, the late Dr. Daniel Goldwyn, and I really wanted to see him to get help for my chronic fatigue syndrome. And one of the things that I promised was that I'd do the cooking. And there are a few dishes that I can cook, but I didn't live up to my promise, and that relationship didn't last very long. And you could say, 40, you were such a user, right? You're moving across the country. You're just getting with this woman, dropping another woman so that you could get access to a great psychiatrist. But when you're desperate for what seems like an insoluble problem, the chronic fatigue syndrome, right? You will start using people. So the more desperate you are, the more you're going to use people. And the honorable person wants to secure all the ingredients possible to minimize the chances of leading a desperate life.
They have. And so it has entirely been ruined by government and government action, particularly severely in that last 14 years that you've mentioned. And it's been all Democrats, as you say, supermajority in the legislature, Democrats up and down the state at every level of government. Now, there's a few cities and a few counties, Orange County, some in San Diego, et cetera, the inland in the Central Valley, where some Republicans exist at the local government level that have some power. But the state always comes in and tries to overrule them. The city of Huntington Beach, which has a conservative legislature, just recently voted to have IDs be shown.
So I worked in landscaping. So when I worked for a year after high school in Australia, came back to California, and I went from earning about $25, $30 an hour to earning $4 an hour because California has a lot more immigration, because Australia is much more restrictive on its immigration. It's a much better place for the average bloke, and wages are much higher. But when I was working in landscaping, it was unbearable without a Sony Walkman. And that's where I developed the habit of listening to talk radio. I listened to KGO AM 810 out of San Francisco. I listened to a ton of talk radio. First started listening to Rush Limbaugh, who's on the air in Sacramento. And I listened a lot to the Eagles. And there was just this one song that haunted me called The Last Resort. She heard about a place, people were smiling. They spoke about the red man's way and how they loved the land. And they came from everywhere to the Great Divide, seeking a place to stand or a place to hide. Down in the crowded bars, out for a good time. Can't wait to tell you all what it's like up there. And they called it paradise. I don't know why. Somebody laid the mountains low while the town got high. Then the chilly winds blew down across the desert, through the canyons of the coast to the Malibu, where the pretty people play, hungry for power, to light their neon way, give them things to do. Some rich man came and raped the land. Nobody caught him. Put up a bunch of ugly boxes, and Jesus people bought him. And they called it paradise, the place to be. They watched the hazy sun sinking in the sea. You can leave it all behind, say to Lahaina, just like the missionaries did so many years ago. They even bought a neon sign, Jesus is coming. Brought the white man's burden down, brought the white man's reign. Who will provide the grand design? What is yours and what is mine? Because there is no more new frontier. We have got to make it here. We satisfy our endless needs and justify our bloody deeds in the name of destiny and in the name of God. And you can see them on a Sunday morning stand up and sing about what it's like up there. They call it paradise. I don't know why. You call someplace paradise, kiss it goodbye. Well, if you call someplace paradise, it's usually been developed and protected and created and pushed forward by a particular demographic, and then you create something great, and then people of a different demographic will invade, and they don't have the original skill mix of the people who made a place great. I don't read much pop music criticism, but there was a little bit I read on the Eagles, and the line that I remember was that the Eagles showed that pop music doesn't have to be moronic.
Shown to vote. Imagine that. The state of California, with Gavin Newsom, has come down on them and is suing them, saying you can't do that. It's against state law. So even those few Republicans who have a little fiefdom of control somewhere, the state is coming in with their heavy hand and saying, no, you're going to do it our leftist, neo-Marxist way. We're not allowing you to do it your way.
Now, John Campbell, I've been asked by Hillsdale College to write for Imprimis an essay on what happened here. And I'm going to begin with the...
So energy is key to an economy, and energy is key to a life. And one of the greatest sources of energy that I am aware of is music, right? I can bring a whole new level of energy to work and to my life when I'm listening to the right tunes. And also action movies, I find them incredibly activating, and being around people that I like, right? Having people that I like and respect in my life, to me, that's the greatest source of energy. And then having interactions with people who are brilliant. Oh, my God, that's just so intoxicating for me. Just talking to people with IQs over 145 And that to me is the greatest thrill of all. The greatest love of all is brilliance.
Endangered Species Act, the Coastal Act, the 1972 initiative that established the Coastal Commission, and the Clean Water Act, the federal agencies, the state agencies, the regional. Government gridlock is what happened here. And government gridlock has empowered the most extreme environmental activists to stop the clearing of coastal sage scrub and other forests. Now, coastal sage scrub is a unique feature of the California landscape, but it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. If you don't cut it, it's going to burn. And as you said, for 500 years we've got records of this. Do you think we'll start the equivalent of mowing the grass in California now, though the barn door is open and a lot of cows are out?
So Skip Bayless was doing a 2-hour morning show in his 60s. Is he nearly 70 now? And he would not take a bathroom break typically. And the guy who anchors NFL Red Zone, Scott Hansen, he famously does not take a bathroom break. He does 6.5 hours of live commercial-free football without taking a bathroom break. I mean, I admire people like that because in my family, we cannot walk past a bathroom without going in. And I once met this woman at an Orthodox synagogue in Portland, and we went out and we climbed Mount Hood. And we were climbing up and down the hill. It was September. We climbed up to the snow, climbed back down. We were hiking for about 8 hours. She did not take one bathroom break. I should have married that woman. I mean, the kidneys on that woman. My God. Why is Trump like kind of reversing himself on TikTok ban? I don't like
Writing this in a statement, quote, a Chinese app wants to be the next TikTok, complete with Chinese control. Parents and social media creators should be aware that the CCP exploits the People's Republic of China-based applications to surveil and censor Americans. But some of these TikTok refugees, we've spoken with them. They say they know the risks, they're not bothered, and they're joining Red Note anyway. Watch here.
I think that all of these apps have like those types of risks, and but if at the end of the day, if this is what everyone's going to be using, then like I'll be there.
So there you go. She's joining, but we'll have to see what happens because just maybe these TikTok refugees won't have to leave TikTok after all. President-elect Trump's pick for National Security Advisor, that's Congressman Mike Waltz, he said today that Trump is considering options to save TikTok. And that also comes, Sandra, as TikTok CEO Shou Chew is reportedly invited and planning to attend Monday's inauguration. So it seems there might be some moves made in the background. We'll have to wait and see.
TikTok is not even allowed to be used in China. Is Red Note?
Red Note is completely Chinese controlled, but it openly censors all the information. So we have Americans now that are joining this Chinese controlled app, exposing themselves.
All right, that's ridiculous to say that TikTok's not in China. It is in China, but why on earth do we allow our greatest strategic rival to have control of TikTok and then so much information about Americans? Doesn't China also own Grindr? So in the face of imperious physical sexual demands, many men are helpless. We should ban Grindr, or at least make sure that the people who own Grindr are not connected to the Chinese Communist Party.
I would love to say yes, because logic says the answer should be yes. Emotion says the answer should be yes. Simply reactivity, if you will, says the answer should be yes. But so many times I have hoped in California that something would get these people to back off their extreme nonsensical positions, and it never does. I mean, you talk about water. Gavin Newsom.
So I use TikTok, but I don't have the app on my phone. I just use it on desktop. And I don't know, a little ambivalent about it, but it was part of this automated system that I subscribed to for uploading shorts. So I'm not taking TikTok by storm. But what's going on here? 69 followers, 1,856 likes. Okay, here's one of my highest rating TikToks.
People gaslight you, who deny their own manipulative behavior, who ignore the evidence when you present it to them, who are dismissive and critical if you disprove their fabrications, who never address their inappropriate behavior and said it's your fault for being overly sensitive. The problem isn't the abuse, it's your reaction to the abuse. People who gaslight you, who
Okay, that got 6,000 views. Is there anything else that I did that grabbed the attention of TikTok? So for a while, I was only getting 2, 3, 7 views. And then get the hook. It's like, oh, wow, 500 people listened to community guidelines violation. Wonder what I did there. So 1,500. Let's see what.
Right, so the people who are Christian nationalists today, they wouldn't have been Christian nationalists 50 years ago. There'd be no such thing as Christian nationalism. Right? We only get Christian nationalism because of the triumph of secularism. So let me play a little bit more here from Sosa.
And I think that's been tried before too, like particularly in like the 70s and the 80s with the religious right, the evangelicals in America, and their sort of attempts to make Christianity into this political force. I think not only is that not effective politically, but I also think that's a little disingenuous in terms of theology. Like obviously.
Yeah, does he actually know anything about Christian theology? Right, he's coming from a naturalistic perspective, which is fine. Something wrong with that. But he's treating Christian theology as though it's an essential, unchanging part of Christianity, when Christian theology changes with times and places, right? So.
Okay, where are some of my other big hit TikTok releases? Setting TikTok afire. 200 views, 7 views. My God, I know there was a hit in here somewhere. $262.9. Man, I thought I was bigger on TikTok than I am. Oh, wait. There's a way where you can search by views. What the hell am I doing?
Tore down 5 dams. There are 5 less dams in California than there were 50 years ago when there were 20 million less people. And he bragged about it. And what is this about? One thing, this national show, people listening, you'll hear about the Delta smelt and that this is a fish. It's just like you're saying, coastal sage, that the environmentalists try to protect. And so they don't allow dams. They don't allow you to save any water. They don't allow you to do.
Okay, my greatest hits are on TikTok.
I was stunned. It takes a lot to even surprise me. I was stunned at what Liz Cheney said about abortion yesterday. I was stunned.
I thought she was one of the.
You can't call yourself pro-life after that.
Also, no one's pro-life. Melania is not. There's JD Vance is hedging. Sean, this is a very big issue for most pro-life women. It's my number 1 or number 2 how I vote, especially after becoming a mom. And now I feel totally in no man's land with the party in general. And then Liz Cheney going on TV and be like, hey, conservative pro-life moms, it's okay. The Vice President Harris and her running mate who signed a bill where you can have abortions up to 36 weeks. It's fine. It's not fine. I'm not going to be gaslit into being told it's fine. I just don't know what their campaign is doing. I was watching it last night and I was just I'm so offended by all of this. I'm just so offended that I'm going to remove everything that's been important to me religiously, spiritually, and politically for 20 years. Or longer, 30 years. And I just don't understand who it's for. And I think that they're making really, really sublimely poor decisions.
I was stunned.
So what did Liz Cheney say? Well, she campaigned with Kamala Harris, and Liz Cheney has always been pro-life. But when she started campaigning with Kamala Harris, she said it essentially it didn't matter that Kamala Harris was pro-abortion. All right.
And rather than making a case for why your party and your politicians have the best plans for improving the quality of life for regular Americans, right? The focus on calling Donald Trump names and trying to ban him from the ballot, practicing lawfare against him, and the uniform nature of news media coverage just falling in line with Democratic talking points just made Donald Trump stronger.
Okay, I could have edited that video better.
This is Trump's state fair, only it's real for him. He actually loves it. So what do you guys make of it?
Photos and videos were just, they were wonderful. And,
The purpose of his appearance was to drive the narrative that.
So Elliot Blatt was absolutely appalled by this, and I don't know why, except I think that Elliot regards fast food as some great evil. I don't. All right. I don't think it's going to cause you significant damage if you eat fast food once or twice a week.
Kamala Harris never really worked this job that has been a centerpiece of the biography that she's put forward on the campaign trail. And as a result, there was a ton of media coverage about this event in which the media said Trump is pushing this unproven claim that Kamala Harris never worked at McDonald's.
Okay, that wasn't exactly stimulating.
The media became particularly one-sided in the final week of the campaign. The New York Times became particularly one-sided. They kept running at the top of their webpage for the previous week, what's at stake? And David Sanger, their chief foreign policy correspondent, said, what's at stake is having a foreign policy that Trump would just operate on whim. And Trump would not abide by any of the norms of American foreign policy. So that's a bad thing. American foreign policy has overall, since the Cold War, been a disaster. And so a normal person would think not following the norms of disastrous foreign policy would be a fantastic development. The New York Times read hardly any critical articles about Kamala Harris in the final week of the campaign. She was just objectively a terrible candidate. And then all the overheated rhetoric about Trump being a white supremacist, a fascist.
Okay, so Donald Trump for decades has stood for a different type of trade policy, a more America First trade policy, and a more America First immigration policy. So you could call him protectionist, and you could call him restrictionist with regard to immigration, and he has been consistently against forever wars. And these are his instincts, and I think they're pretty good instincts. And I've come around to his point of view on trade, and the idea that he just operates on whim. Yeah, it's whim or instinct, and they've been consistent for a long time. Right, what the hell is going on with California?
Any of this kind of stuff to save the Delta smelt. The Delta smelt is not a native fish to California. It was brought in during the gold rush in 1849 by the miners. I can make an environmental argument that the Delta smelt is invasive, and we should
an invasive species. Stand by.
So I grew up in a home that was obsessed with preventative health and very particular about diet. So that's why I have probably a visceral reaction to Elliot Blatt's desire to change America's diet. So there's just such an obsession with diet and with all these preventative health measures and worries about things coming from electrical power lines, et cetera, that it drove me crazy. Okay, I got to take this call, so hang on.
John really is an Angelino. When I first got out here in 1989, it wasn't long thereafter I met John in the captivating Mrs. Campbell. We attended the same church. He had a beautiful voice. I turned around and I said, you ought to be in the choir. He went into the choir. We're pretty good friends. John is an automobile guy. I am not. He's a car guy. I think that's a ridiculous waste of time. But he loves the state, and he lives in Arizona now. Why'd you leave, John?
Everybody's going to say taxes, and taxes were certainly part of it. But that's not all of it at all. It's that everything in California is more expensive. Everything. Or not just land, real estate. Oreos are more expensive. And it's because of the regulation. I bought a McDonald's meal a few years ago here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I then flew to California and bought the same meal in Costa Mesa, California. It was 70% more. 70% more. Why? Because the beef costs the same. That's not the difference. But their insurance is more. Their rent's more. Their environmental costs are more. Their regulatory costs are more. Their minimum wage is more. You go through it all. Everything they have is more, and they got to put it in the price of the burger. So it's not just the tax. It's everything. But it's also the freedom. It's that there's so many things you can't do. Now, I'm a member of the NRA. I'm a gun owner. California, you have to have a license to buy
ammunition, and you can only buy ammunition for a gun that you have licensed in California with that caliber. I mean, this stuff is unbelievable. The rules they have, you own property, you want to build on it. The regulation, the hoops you have to jump through to build on your property. And let me assure you, whatever you want to build, you will not be able to build it. They will make you do something else. They pull freedom back, put regulation out, make everything more expensive.
Dennis Prager speaks. No, it wasn't Dennis Prager, but I remember I went on a date with a woman I met at Sinai Temple. And on our first date, right, she just kept getting on her phone. And women apparently are just driven to try to test you. And I think I just accepted it, but I didn't want to date her again after that. And so after that, she just pursued me. But because she'd been so careless with my time and so disrespectful on our first date that just... I couldn't go out with her with any enthusiasm. So I guess I should recognize why women want to shit test us and behave disrespectfully to see how we react. But I don't enjoy being treated with disrespect, and it just kills any incentive that I might have to spend more time.
And it's less free. You just put all that together, and the weather's great. The views are great. The landscape is beautiful, but it doesn't make up for bad government. I'm sure it's beautiful in Haiti, too. I don't want to live there.
Why do you think that every other state in the union was done counting their votes before California, and not by a little, but by a lot? Like weeks. It took weeks for California to count its vote. Why is that?
Yeah, another good reason. Not only is it...
Interesting point here made by Bob. Why is everyone talking about the welfare state? Why is no one talking about the beauty state? So beauty correlates with a lot of objectively good things, right? Beautiful people tend to be smarter on average. And when we are surrounded by beauty, we tend to behave better. It's better for our spirit and our energy levels. Yeah, more emphasis on beauty. I like Donald Trump's architectural standards. So I don't know much about architecture. I don't know much about art, but I know that which viscerally repels me. I know that which inspires me. I know that which feels good, that which keeps my attention, and that which gives me a feeling of doom. So I love that. Let's move more towards the beauty state.
Do you not have to show an ID in California? It is illegal to show an ID. Let me give you an example. Let's say I go in and vote, and I say I'm Hugh Hewitt. I can vote for you. They can.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Back on the network, Congressman Campbell, stand by. John, this is the most important question I've asked you. Will it change? It's such a devastation. It's so bad. One estimate of the losses, which might be high, according to some other smart people, is $250 billion to $300 billion. The lowest estimate is $50 billion. It's going to break the FAIR Fund, the California option to insure your home. Other insurers where I believe I expect to have my price doubled on my house in California. What do you think?
I have some hope that politically things might change. And I can only pray that that hope is not misplaced. People have been asking me since I left, and it was 9 years ago that I moved out of California. And people have been asking me since I left, John, what will ever happen to change? And I will say, I think there's two things. One is that a personality comes along, a Donald Trump, a California Donald Trump, if you will, a transformative personality that comes in as governor, takes over, and starts to move things in the other direction. The way we're seeing Donald Trump move the whole country. I mean, my gosh, Coca-Cola gave him an award, one of the wokest companies out there. So as you see things change, that's one thing.
Okay, I had a thing with a woman from the family that owns much of Coca-Cola, and she was charming. She was beautiful. She was educated, but quite the leftist. And she wanted to induct me into the world of phone sex. I'd never participated in phone sex, and it was a door to a room that I did not want to open. But I remember how charming and educated she was, and how left-wing. And yes, Coca-Cola is quite the left-wing corporation, quite the bunch of wokesters, and now Coke coming around to give Donald Trump a Diet Coke memorial bottle, right? To see even like a left-wing corporation like Coca-Cola fall in line. That's beautiful.
And let me address that before I get to the second. Trump has said he thinks there's a chance in 2026 that a Republican could win. And so that means that Donald is paying some attention to this. And is it a Peter Thiel? I don't know the guy from Adam, but certainly he's very close to Trump. He's a billionaire. He's highly successful. Is it somebody like that that maybe could come in and turn things around? I don't know. That's one chance. The second, because it's a question is who. The second thing is, when you hit rock bottom, you got to look up and you got to think, okay, I can't stay here anymore. We got to do something different to get me out of the bottom of this pool. And so that may be happening now in California. There's some indications of that. I'm seeing, again, anecdotal evidence of people who are
Well, you and I are both anecdotal evidence. Now, evidence of anecdotes that's it. Now, anecdotal evidence is evidence of anecdotes. We both left. I'm a Virginia.
Right. So this guy, former Congressman John Campbell, he has a website called lookthroughthechaos.com, and he has a blog. And these are his thoughts from 2 days ago. LA Mayor Karen Bass was toying around with running for governor in 2026. She's 71 years of age. That will not happen. She will not be reelected as mayor. She is done. Gavin Newsom is running away from this as fast as his swept back hair will carry him. He is blaming the locals. Gavin wants to be president in 2028. Can't think that this is good for his presidential prospects. Billionaire Rick Caruso ran for mayor against Bass, lost 2022 after spending $100 million of his own money. He's rumored as a 2026 California gubernatorial candidate. He could walk into the mayor's office in June 2026. DEI, right? The fire chief in LA is a lesbian. This would not be a problem if she was competent, but she's not. We've got 9 employees making over $300,000 a year each, including benefits, promoting DEI at the top of the Los Angeles Fire Department. Right? The LAFD policies on DEI don't have the word competence. There's a video circulating where an overweight lesbian fire official is asked by a heterosexual woman if she could carry her husband out of a burning building. Fire person responds that your husband shouldn't be lying on the floor if the building is burning. He must have done something wrong. Well, what if he's handicapped? What if he's overcome by smoke inhalation? And John Campbell says, when I was in the California legislature, I had the lowest rating of all 80 assembly members with fire unions. They spent a lot of money to defeat me. This DEI hiring has been going on for decades. Adam Carolla applied to be a LA firefighter, told there would be an 8-year wait because they weren't hiring more white heterosexual males. Unions have bribed Sacramento to get pay packages, unlike any other firefighters anywhere. LAFD is badly run. The people are overpaid. All government employee unions are part of the problem. Their grip on the legislature needs to be broken. When you try to build something in Los Angeles, the bureaucratic maze is enormous. It'll take you longer to get approvals than to build the building. Many of the Pacific Palisades and Malibu homes are in the Coastal Commission zone. Right, so many more layers of approval from a completely unaccountable state agency. So Sierra Club and other neo-Marxist groups are salivating right now. They're going to try to turn these former home lots into nature preserves and homeless shelters and illegal alien welcoming stations and gay and lesbian centers of love. Think about the big fire in Maui 18 months ago, right? They've done no rebuilding since then. So if there is a more Marxist, leftist, corrupt, and woke state than California, it is Hawaii. We will always have fires. How do you keep a handle on them? Make sure you have lots of water. Gavin Newsom, California's governor, bragged he tore down 5 dams in the last 4 years. They should build 30 new ones. Use technology to identify where a fire starts and have a fast response crew or even automatic sprinklers ready to go into action. And we need to have free market house insurance. All right. We are subsidizing people moving into dangerous areas. All right. You want to move into a dangerous area where you are at great risk for your home building down, that you should be paying the price for that, ensuring that. That should not be on the rest of us. And the New York Times had a good op-ed on this. If you want to if you want to move into an area that is hazardous, right, then you should pay the price for that. Right? Why should other people subsidize your choices, right? Damn, let me find the correct link.
Our pal Adam Carolla. Unfortunately, Mr. Carolla's home is undefined at this point because he was evacuated, had to evacuate, and doesn't know, right? Am I right now, or did you get new info? You don't know what the status of your home is, right?
I got new info recently that it's intact. I'm in Malibu, sort of right in the middle of Malibu, and everything in front of it and behind it is destroyed. But miraculously, the fire went over my dwelling and out onto PCH and then destroyed everything in front of me.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you are, your house is safe, but you can't live there for a long time. You can't go back to that house. You know that, right?
Yeah, there's no electricity at this point, and we don't know about smoke damage and other forms of damage and just sort of infrastructure. And then soon as the rains hit, the mudslides are going to start. And when the mudslides start, they're going to block off Pacific Coast Highway and then the canyons that lead there. And there's no other way to get there.
Right. When I was 19, I wanted to buy a sports car. What's the sports car that Chevy puts out? I got to drive one. My boss owned one. It was just so much fun to drive, but the insurance for it was just outrageous. So I did not buy that Chevy sports car, a muscle car. My God, when is Luke going to decode Peter Zion? I think I did that. Look for decoding Peter Zion. So trying to remember the main points. He is great at sound bites, attention-getting sound bites. His track record is mixed. He is worthy of listening to, but he speaks with great assurance regarding many things that he does not know much about. So, trying to remember, but I guarantee you there is a decoding Peter Zion out there. And it will change your life. You have to stop underwriting people who move to climate danger zones, right? Do you want to underwrite teens who want to buy sports cars and underwrite their car insurance? No, of course you don't. So we've used political legislation to prevent private home insurers charging market prices, right? If we simply left it up to the free market, right, it would naturally force Americans to confront the ugly realities of our changing climate and deter them from flocking to places where human habitation is increasingly untenable. Right, this basic system of supply and demand has been stymied by regional and federal policies. Right, so both Democrats and Republicans cave to short-term political pressures to keep home insurance premiums ridiculously low. This distorts the market and it endangers our economy by sending scarce resources into the path of natural disasters and will devastate stillborn fires. This is like all the legislation we've passed forcing banks to extend mortgage loans to people who are quite unlikely to pay them back. So insurance prices should quantify the risks of living in a certain place or driving a certain vehicle. It should be more expensive to insure a home in an area that is far more likely to be destroyed by a disaster. But states vary widely in their willingness to allow insurance premiums to increase. Some states, such as California, make it far harder than other states for insurers to raise prices. All right, California is one of the most resistant to home insurance price rises. It refused to let insurers raise premiums, and insurers doing business in these heavily regulated states who are unable to raise premiums when needed, right, they shift many of the costs to homeowners who live in places that are more accommodating to premium increases. So all sorts of middle-class communities, such as Enid, Oklahoma, are subsidizing the owners of $1 million homes in Malibu. Right? That's crazy. Just like plumbers and electricians should not be paying for the college debt of accountants and lawyers. So home insurance is just one way our financial system encourages Americans to move to flood-prone sections of Florida or dangerous parts of Arizona and California. We also have government mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which subsidize mortgages. We should stop subsidizing and regulating away from the free market people's homes and insurance. Right? People move into harm's way because they are subsidized to move into harm's way, but that affordability is a mirage, right? Their mortgage and insurance risks are being subsidized by you and me, right? Our system is subsidizing people moving into dangerous areas. So let's stop doing that. Let's allow home insurers to charge appropriate premiums if you want to live in a dangerous place. Right? If you want to live in a place that's prone to flooding, then you should have to pay the price.
Other than Pacific Coast Highway and a canyon or two. So,
and then you're going to have the pollution, too, of the fires and the air quality, and it's just going to be on and on. I estimate, number one, that Los Angeles County will not recover for 5 years.
I haven't been able to complete my full workout over the past 10 days, and it just started occurring to me, my God, maybe it's the air quality. So I look at my phone, it says the air quality is excellent, but apparently there are all sorts of bad things in the air that are not measured by the AQI or the air quality index.
Years. It's going to have long, it's going to take them to recover this. You might be able to get back into your house this year, but it's going to be dicey. Now, you've lived out there for your whole life. I think you're 87 years old now, right? Or is it?
That's right. I'm 2 years younger than you.
Right. You're 60. You've lived out there your whole life. You live in Malibu, which is a...
Yeah, we should stop privatizing gains and subsidizing losses. If you want to do something crazy dangerous, you should bear the risk, not me. I'm a very respectable man.
High-risk neighborhood. Have you ever seen the state take preventive measures around your house to mitigate a possible fire?
The state is not good at nuts and bolts things. It's good at, feel-good stuff like the West Hollywood patrol cars have the gay flag on the side of them, which is important. So we do stuff like that. We do a lot of things that are sort of window dressing, but we don't do nuts and bolts legislation. And no, if there's a mudslide on Pacific Coast Highway, it takes 6 months to clean up a pile of dirt the size of a minivan. So everything is slow. And let's not forget that a lot.
So as we become a more secular society, people seem to be looking to politics increasingly to meet their spiritual needs. So it's a spiritual need to have like the LGBT emblem on fire trucks and to promote on the basis of sexual identity. And politics on the left seems largely about meeting some weird mutation of the Reform Christianity movement that became Protestantism, that tried to etherealize Christianity, say it's just primarily in your heart, and then when you have a transformation of the heart, then all your speech and your behavior becomes much more careful and conscientious. And the left-wing woke ideology, that type of left-wing politics, is just a mutation of Protestant Christianity.
A lot of the problem with the fires, I mean, you've spoken a lot and played clips of Trump talking about cleaning up the bed and the floor.
And Kip says Adam Carolla hasn't had a good co-host since Teresa Strasser. I love Teresa Strasser. She started out as a journalist and a columnist for a Jewish paper in Northern California. Then she moved to the Jewish Journal in Los Angeles. But her writing has always been marked by an incredible honesty. If you're going to write about yourself, don't be praising yourself. And her writing was always compelling. It was just so brutally honest. I only got to meet her once, but I always enjoyed the brutal honesty and the self-examination.
Floor of the forest and preventative measures, aqueducts, things like that. I've spoke to firemen in Malibu, and they say most of the fires they put out are caused by the homeless. As a matter of fact, they said basically all the fires we put out are caused by the homeless who camp up in the hills, get high, pass out, smoking crack, fire ensues. That's number one. Number two, PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, is festooned with 100-year-old power poles made of rotted wood that all immediately fall over in a high wind or in a fire, and then live power lines are all over the street, and they inhibit the firefighting. Obviously, they're a danger. You're spraying water. You have live lines buzzing around. So we don't even bury the power lines. We've been trying to bury the power lines for years, and there's no movement on it. And a lot of the fires are caused by this.
Yeah, the squirrels might get upset. And I'm being sarcastic, but isn't that the crux of the matter? That there's always a reason not to protect the citizens? There's always some kind of woke reason? Isn't that the truth?
No, we have the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission is unelected, 8 or 10 sort of hippie lesbians who are angry at their dads and hate everyone who lives in Malibu and along the coast in Orange County. And they just make proclamations. And we try to get a water desalination plant going, or we try to develop the wetlands or whatever it is. And they just say, no, go literally pound sand. So we have these little groups of angry, mostly women, mostly young, and they're super woke and they're super progressive, and they don't even live along the coast because they can't afford it, and they're angry at anyone who makes a good living, and they have ultimate power, and that's the way we roll here in California.
What about Newsom, though? I mean, he's a pretty powerful governor.
Being characterized by anger is not a good way to live, right? There are times, circumstances, situations where anger is incredibly valuable. It can force you to break through your self-imposed limits to do things that you need to do. So if anger gives you the fuel to get done in the moment what you need to get done, confront somebody, to push yourself, to take unusually intense action, then anger serves you. But outside of those immediate circumstances where anger gives you the fuel to do something that you would not otherwise do, anger does not serve you. And to have anger characterize you, right, not a good approach to life.
And I want to be fair to Newsom. Has he done anything in his entire tenure in Sacramento to protect the citizens of California from these national disasters? Give me anything.
I've never heard him pull up to a microphone and say anything that would be considered pragmatic. He talks about, the LGBT community constantly, and he talks about everybody having a voice and a seat at the table, and nobody's illegal, and we're starting, we're going to be a sanctuary state. Basically, here's where Newsom goes south. And here's where all the progressive Democrats go south. Here's where it all falls apart for them. They fight Trump on everything that Trump says. So if Trump says, let's beef up the border, they go, we're not beefing up the border. They go, build a wall. They go, tear down the wall. They go, clean up the forest. He goes, we're not cleaning up the forest. He goes, fill the aqueducts. We're not filling the aqueducts. They are so stupid and knee-jerk that if he said the sky's blue, they'd say the sky's red. Well, it is now in California, but it's on fire. They've screwed themselves by...
Right. Personalizing politics is not useful. Donald Trump, for all his flaws, all right, there are going to be some situations where he's excellent. And to just be anti-Trump or automatically pro-Trump is not a sophisticated attitude.
By literally doing the opposite of everything Trump has suggested. Now, you can disagree with Trump, but much of his policy is pragmatic. And you just disagreeing with pragmatic stuff to disagree is going to end up...
Donald Trump is the most pragmatic, least ideological president that I can remember.
Biting you in the ass, and that's what happened to Newsom.
Final question. Nobody knows Karen Bass, who's the mayor of Los Angeles City. Is she as bad as people are portraying her?
She's a longtime progressive L.A. Democrat politician, so she's horrible just from that pedigree. She also spent a lot of time in her youth going back and forth to Cuba and was involved with some group that sort of loved Fidel.
Adam Carolla has a lot of common sense. I don't think he went to college. He worked construction for years. He's an atheist. He seems very rooted in reality.
So she's got that, progressive left-wing bona fides thing going, which means she's not going to do anything. She's going to hang around. I mean, she was in Ghana taking a trip when all this went down. Yeah, she's horrible. We could get someone like Rick Caruso in there, someone who builds things, someone who's pragmatic, someone who knows how to manage people and funds. But L.A. is way too progressive for that. Hopefully we're coming down to earth now. I don't know who she is. I don't know what she stands for. I'm sure she's horrible. And if you look around.
Okay, you're probably wondering, what does Greg Gutfeld have to say about these things?
Since the wildfire started, and it's odd that not a single leader has risen from this catastrophe. Oh, there's plenty of ash, but no phoenix rising from it, just chickens with their heads cut off.
That's a great point. It was one that I was reaching for yesterday, or was it the day before, the dog that didn't bark. What's stunning is that no one is praising our political leaders in California, because no one is inspiring in their response.
We now learn that L.A. Mayor Karen Bass was hosting a cocktail party in Ghana when the catastrophe started. We heard she was handing out shots of Fireball. But not one single heroic person of action. Hell, even Smokey the Bear is nowhere to be found. Someone said he moved to Florida 2 years ago for the lower taxes. Instead, you get this.
We're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties.
So a comic is only funny if he's touching on truth, right? If Greg Gutfeld doesn't say anything that's true, there's not going to be an involuntary response of laughter.
What's this? It's like you saw a hypnotist years ago who said, from now on, every time you hear the word fire, you will start to dance. He doesn't even know it. But I guess that's what snakes do when they feel threatened. Then there's Cam.
Critically important that to the extent you can find anything that gives you an ability to be patient in this extremely dangerous and unprecedented crisis, that you do.
Yeah, be patient. For what exactly? For you to complete a real sentence? We could be here for months. She's like a talking parrot with a speech impediment, making no sense and complaining about crackers. Then there's this idiot.
Looking back, would you have taken that trip overseas?
You know, I am going to focus today
but please,
on what we know.
Truly a real inspiration for homicide. Then the big guy.
You'd have this fire going crazy and burning everything down and 3 houses being fine. Or neighborhoods that were still green. That house next door still has green shrubbery on it.
So we were listening to the words of a PR professional yesterday, and she said, when words and physicality clash, we tend to believe the physicality. And there's something about the frailty of Bass and Biden and the weird physiology of Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris that all seems to create an image in one's mind of a lack of competence.
And, you know, the house is fine. There's only, I think, 4 or 5 houses in that 200, you know, it's in the Pasadena area. But my generic point is, it's almost like it's a battle scene.
Thanks for the update, dip. No. If that was a painting by Picasso, it would have been called Babbling Retard. Now, the reason no leader has emerged is because they've been soaking in identity politics like Newsom's head in a vat of styling gel. So if the issue isn't race or gender, they're lost. So sure, Karen.
So can we say the word retard? Have we expanded the Overton window? That will get you banned on Twitch. Right? If you are frustrated by all the speech restrictions on YouTube, know that it's far worse on Twitch. It's far worse on many other social media platforms. And YouTube is becoming much easier with regard to censorship over the past few years. So I got perma-banned from Twitch just from playing a Tucker Carlson segment where he mentioned the Great Replacement.
Karen Bass can unveil a new pride flag, but if it catches fire, everyone ends up flaming. So you have the biggest fire in LA history, and they can't even figure out the first step to help people. They're like some weirdo who goes to the gym and only works out their neck muscles. Picture that. A freak with a neck. With a neck so big it cuts off blood flow to the brain. And everything else is atrophied. In this case, they failed to build the muscles that would respond to any or all real problems. Whether it's immigration, crime, or natural disasters, they come up empty because in their toolkit, there is but one single club, identity politics, and it can't help them. But it helped them personally before the fire. After all, it's light on effort, but rich in public reward, and the media eats it up. And much of California voted for it. Hell, Hollywood lobbied and politicked on behalf of it. It's easy to see why. Surface-level celebs found identity politics.
There's no correlation between effort and action and moving in the right direction. I felt like I spent much of my life going in circles or retracing my steps. And I particularly noticed with working out and with yoga that if you are inculcating habits of extra tension and compression and you're just pulling down and you are ingraining those habits right more deeply, you're probably doing yourself far more harm than good from working out. And if you just launch into action without taking into consideration the nature of reality and what will be the consequences, what will be the pushback to the action that you take, it often will not serve you well. So I just know whenever I experience humiliation and illness that my default is to stop my efforts and to reconsider where I'm sending my energy and think about new ways of doing things and plotting them out in my head. How's this likely to work out? Because just taking action, right, doesn't necessarily help you.
It's right up their alley. By faking empathy, you appear to do something without having to lift a finger. Hey, look, everybody, not only do I play the good guy in movies, but I'm one in real life, too. It's same with push.
But you see this on the right as well. So many people want to take actions that feel good, and they don't put much cognitive work into asking, well, will this do good? It feels good to tell a lot of people to F off, but usually doesn't do good.
Pushing climate hysteria. Just saying we must do something means you don't have to do anything. Just shout platitudes and you're back on your private jet out of L.A., girlfriend with your girlfriend and her algebra tutor. Of course, you could have done all the things needed to help combat fires while pushing climate change.
So I shared Kendra Jade, not at the same time, with Leonardo DiCaprio and probably 50 other blokes around that time. So certain Hollywood celebrities, Sheen, what was it, Charlie Sheen, Leonardo, they're quite fond of the porn stars.
But they didn't. Why? Because as a boneheaded student might say, that wasn't supposed to be on the test. They live in a world of theory and not reality, and it only helps the cynical bozos who employ it. But the people they elevate are merely exploited on behalf of public virtue. These pawns don't learn anything or gain experience. Instead, they are placed in jobs where they fail because they didn't learn anything or have any experience. Then they end up in positions where life matters and not just black.
So the most sexually intoxicating environment that I've ever been around was not the porn industry. It was mainstream Hollywood. It was just the vibe of such raw, predatory sexual energy was just all around you. I worked as an extra on a lot of sets, and I go to acting classes and workshops and parties. And yeah, just the raw predatory sexual energy was off the hook compared to anything else I've ever encountered. With the one exception of Sacramento, the state legislature, almost all the secretaries were just gorgeous. Right, just stunning women. And I felt that same sexually predatory vibe at an intense level at the state capitol. And so it's not unusual for lobbyists to service multiple politicians at the same time. So many lobbyists are quite attractive females who are willing to trade their body for legislative favors. And there was just a raw predatory sexual vibe that was unlike anything else I've ever encountered in two places primarily, Hollywood and the state capitol, the state legislature.
Black ones. It's not so bad if Coke or Pepsi does it, but when it comes to public safety, this farce is deadly. So while billion-dollar corporations bought into this stuff...
So my point is, it's really hard to keep your head, keep your moral compass on due north when you encounter this tsunami of raw sexual energy. It's women who want to move ahead by using their bodies. It's men who want to prey on women who are looking to move ahead. It's men who want to prey on young men. And you may think that you're invulnerable, but pretty much every bloke has certain scenarios that would just drive him crazy. The reason that most men don't cheat on their wives is because they don't have the opportunity to do so with someone who's attractive and young. And most men are willing to risk everything for an interaction, sexual interaction with a gorgeous young woman. And you have to be particularly grounded to be able to navigate the entertainment industry and big league politics and not lose your mind taking advantage of all the sexual opportunity. Right? You may think you're strong, but wait till you face all these opportunities.
Because it's mere pocket change to them. The rest of us, we pay with our lives. Fact is, identity politics is the most selfish enterprise on earth, for it makes it all about you as you pretend to be about others, and 99.9% of all real practical problems go unsolved. Homelessness, illegal immigration, fire, floods, the view. That's why LA is leaderless, because those in charge, by embracing vanity causes, chose themselves over the people they govern. Talk about a sick burn. Let's welcome tonight's guest.
Okay. Are these guests worth listening to? We'll try one.
Are you upset that a lot of homeless are being blamed for starting fires?
I am. It is, because it's also crackheads and meth heads. It's not just homeless people. It's climate change is what they tell us. The same brainiacs who gives them like no excuse. You can't sit there and go, listen, there's going to be a lot of fires. Climate's changing. There's going to be fires. What'd you just cut? Oh, the firefighting department. Why would you do that?
Yes.
It's insane. And there's not one Republican to blame. You got Gavin Newsom dancing around like he might get hit by a hunk of truth. The mayor's on vacation. My favorite was the head of the fire department, the big giant lady who's like, I can't carry a guy out of a house.
Yes.
If I have to carry you're in the wrong spot. Yeah, that's when I'll need you, dumbass. Right? My legs are broken. I'm trapped under rubble. That would be the wrong spot.
Yes. There is no right spot when you're on fire.
That's right. You just have to rotate so that it evens out the burn. It's horrible.
And this is only funny because it touches on powerful truths.
Horrible. They need to have like one Republican in government in Los Angeles, though.
Just one.
Yeah, so they can blame it on him.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is a Democrat thing from top to bottom. So I hereby volunteer. I will be the scapegoat for L.A. problems. They can just blame me. I figure I'll make $750,000 a year, like the lady who runs the Department of Water and Power.
Yeah.
She makes $750,000 a year, and they ran out of water and power.
Yes. Eric, congratulations on the new book, Wise Guys in the White House, Gangsters, Presidents, and the Deals They Made. This sounds pretty awesome. And you are an expert in crisis management. You've had some pretty famous clients. I know you can't name them. Maybe one rhymes with Shill Bosby, but we won't get into it. This leadership is in crisis right now.
In L.A., yeah.
Yeah. What would you tell them to do?
Well, look, the job of a politician is to accept credit for things they didn't achieve and to accept blame for problems they didn't cause.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago watching the L.A. earthquake. This was about 1994, and a reporter went up to a city manager and went, "What went wrong here?" Well, a tectonic plate moved.
Yeah.
That's what went wrong. But in the media climate that we are in, the only currency we understand is blame.
Right.
And that is, when I have a client in this situation, they want to talk about this and that. The only thing that they talk about is blame. Now, here's the challenge. There is really no way to get out of it, even though people think there is. And what ends up happening is everything that is in the ether, DEI, going to Ghana.
And Kip's got an insightful comment. The anti-California sentiment has surely caught some residents of the Golden State off guard. Yes, it caught me off guard. I didn't realize how much people enjoyed hating on California. Right. It's not the fire. It's everything that California stands for.
not giving the fire department enough money. Whether you caused it or not, it doesn't matter. Her situation, the mayor, is unsurvivable.
Right.
Now, what remains to be seen is Gavin Newsom, because he may have a future, and what he's going to have to show is the thing that Americans want to see more than anything in a politician, which is your capacity to take your beating.
Yeah, and also, great points. It's not so much the thing, it's what you do after the thing. Like, if you make a mistake, you're not judged for it. You just try to do it better next time. But you see with this constant churning of identity politics, it's incapable of change because the ideology matters more, Kat. What was with the weird dance? Did you think he has hemorrhoids? I mean, sometimes you have to do that.
He was standing up.
Well, still.
So about 10 years ago, Kerry Howley, a regular on Red Eye, the former Greg Gutfeld show, I think relayed to Greg one of my remarks about his show. Oh, yes, I was concerned. I really enjoyed watching Red Eye, but I felt a little like it was a little too nasty, too many personal attacks, and I think Kerry Howley, I believe, relayed that to Greg, and Greg responded, "Luke Ford is a weird guy."
Now I think you have hemorrhoids.
You're pregnant, you're going to get hemorrhoids.
Thank you for sharing that with me. You know, I think that also she's not even trying, right? The mayor's not even trying. When she was, I keep going back to that clip where the reporter's trying to ask her questions and she just doesn't answer.
Yeah.
Because by not answering, what she's implying with that is like, oh, I better not say something wrong or else things might get really bad.
Yes.
And the people watching that are people who either their house is burned down or they are reasonably afraid that their house is going to burn down at some time in the near future. So in that moment, her main concern is still herself. And, oh, no, if I say something wrong, then things are going to get worse for me. I think there's really no way things can get worse for you anyway, so you should at least try to say something. It's the least you could do, but I think that it's totally just...
She's acting like a dude in a relationship.
Yeah.
You know?
She is.
Yeah, you just try not to say anything because you think if anything I say, I'm screwed.
Okay. Yeah, or like when you're like, oh yeah, it's like the dude that, yeah, exactly. Like, oh, like you stop, you know, like can you not like other girls' bikini pictures? Like, I guess I'll just delete the app then.
That's great.
Fine, if you want me to delete the app, I will. It's like, no, we're not even talking about the thing anymore. Just talk about the thing. You owe me that.
You know, Tyrus?
Okay, fine. Before you go, I have to push back and blame this on dudes.
Yeah.
Okay, no, because if the spot is bad, we leave.
Yeah.
She's not leaving. That's a woman. So don't put it on us. Because
Oh,
the
I
man
getcha.
at the airport, when they surrounded me like, Tyrus, what are you going to say? And, hey, man, is that flight going to Oklahoma? And I would have left.
Yeah.
We saw exactly who she was when there was no one there to prep her and tell her what to say. And at the airport, the incompetence, the ignorance, and that is exactly why she was put in that position in the first place. The people that funded her, the people that paid for her campaign, all they needed to do was to sign and say little speeches for their agenda. And she was the perfect thing because if you challenge her, her first response is, you're doing it because I'm a woman. And if you're a white person to challenge, you're doing it because I'm black. And then if you get past both those, you're doing this because I'm part of the rainbow. So they all those are contingency plans. But unfortunately, black, rainbow, woman has nothing to do with you partying up while your city that you were sworn in to protect is burning to the ground. So she had no answers. But it's not, and it's funny because you talk about all the time, like, there's too many old white men in politics. When you look at California's setup, it's pretty much the same thing. Isn't that a little bit peculiar that it's all the same thing? Was it when Whitey did that? It was a huge problem. But then they could put all their friends and buddies in positions, all not qualified. Also, while this happened, if Newsom is smart, he'll let it go for another week. And this dance is, while he was doing the interview, realized, I'm going to blame this on the mayor. That's what this was. That was a celebration. That was a celebration like, I got it. The mayor did it.
Well, blame shimmy.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I think you're getting to something that is important, which is force of personality. And one of the things that does happen that is relevant in a crisis situation is, does somebody have a certain amount of strength? And I remember I had a client, the CEO of a very large company, and a reporter stood up and said, you are one of the biggest polluters in this country. He said, you're wrong. We are one of the biggest polluters in the world. And let me tell you what we're trying to do about it. It was so disarming. And one of the things I think people, whether you like them or not, admired about Trump is his capacity.
It is incredibly effective when you admit the truth. It just takes the temperature down. I've been able to transform people who hated me into people who liked me just by admitting the truth of their criticisms.
Capacity to be forceful.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that people also admired about Bill Clinton was the capacity to endure.
Yeah.
And when you have a personality like Bass, you have somebody who seems to be running. And in her defense, there's no magic trick. There's no play here.
All right. Played a little bit yesterday from a publicist critiquing Karen Bass.
So I could help prepare in case something happened, and something happened, and that's why I'm here. Next, you have to acknowledge concerns, address the elephant in the room directly. She should have acknowledged them head on. A simple, heartfelt statement expressing regret for the timing, emphasizing her immediate focus on the crisis, could have gone a long, long way in dampening that storyline. Next, it's just showing empathy. This is not a time for scripted talking points. People need to see and hear that their leaders understand and share their pain. Use clear, direct language. Acknowledge the impact of the crisis on individuals. Bass could have done so much more to express genuine sorrow for those who lost loved ones, their homes, their livelihoods. Understandable that as a leader, you don't want to go off message. In this environment, critics will bury you. So you want to make sure that you're on message. However, it is very difficult to go off message when you're talking about compassion. How difficult is it to be a mayor and say that you are hurting? You were just driving around Los Angeles. Talk about what you saw. Talk about the pain. Talk about how it makes you feel. I am sickened by what happened.
The Americans who have moved to Australia and work in the media industry, particularly in journalism, often have an edge because Americans are so much more open about their emotions than Australians. So it was like virgin territory for some Americans who went down under, and then they started to talk to Australians in a state of crisis or who'd really suffered and delved into what they were feeling, because when you grow up in Australia, you're not encouraged to talk about how you feel.
Driving around Los Angeles, getting out, talking to the victims, talking to the firefighters. Our city is in ruins. Okay, I just pulled a quote from Bruce Springsteen, but it's not that difficult to do. Next, be transparent, be accountable. Don't shy away from difficult questions. Bass's attempts to downplay the LAFD budget cuts and defer accountability only made her appear defensive and untrustworthy. A more effective approach is to acknowledge the budget realities, explain the difficult decisions that were made, and pledge a thorough review of the city's fire preparedness after the crisis. Don't say you're examining everything after the crisis, because there are things that you can examine right there on the spot. But going through a budget, going through those decisions, the public, the press, they should understand now's not the time for me to do accounting. I'll get to that. We'll talk about it. But right now.
Right. The more transparent you are, the more that you are open to criticism, it just brings the temperature down in your interactions with others. They feel so much better.
I mean, it's like I interviewed Gavin Newsom on my podcast some years ago, and he was telling me that, you know, the homeless issue was the biggest issue ever for him. That was he was like the number one homeless issue guy. That's about 9 years ago now.
Yeah, it worked out great.
It worked out great. And I told him, well, the biggest problem with homelessness, which was almost a decade ago, I said it's, junkies and people with mental situations. It's their mental problems or people that are on drugs or both. And then he proceeded to explain to me the real picture of homelessness. And I'll quote him here, was a mother of three whose husband left, who had a full-time job, but she was only getting paid minimum wage. And then I then told him that is not the picture of homelessness. The picture of homelessness is junkies who are out of their mind. That's all we got. Now, he never came back on the show. But the point is this, as an example. I could have agreed with him, except for I knew he was 100% wrong. And I could have worked out a situation where me and Gavin Newsom became pretty good friends by me telling him something that I knew was patently false. But then, why be a comedian? And who are you? And then what do you stand for? And I don't even know what you stand for. It's like, I said a bunch of stuff around COVID. It got a lot of people very angry. It became
you and Drew, for sure.
Yeah, me and Dr. Drew, for sure. Now, got us pushed further out from whatever the Hollywood nucleus was. Okay, I could, I wrote a tweet over 2 years ago, and it said, I'll paraphrase, but basically COVID kills old people and it kills sick people, and the rest of you just got played. And who's getting played next time? Because that's the way I looked at the whole
And
thing.
who's getting played next time?
Yeah, there's some truth to that. But according to various academic surveys that I've read, the average COVID death took 16 years of life. So COVID wasn't primarily killing people in the last few months of life. Now, the average COVID death in the United States is something like 76 but we did have 2,000 people under the age of 18 who died from COVID.
Time is a really important question.
Yeah, because I want to be prepared for the next one. Because first off, I don't like the way any of you reacted to this. We shut down schools and beaches and outdoor dining, and you went right along with it and started enforcing it.
Yeah,
we should have never done it. There should have been a rebellion. But anyway, I sent that tweet out. Got a lot of people super angry, really angry, and like Newsweek and stuff like that. And Judd Apatow, who's a friend and is a really good dude, he called me and he said, "You got to take that tweet down because people are pissed." And I was like, "Can't do it. It's up today. It's been up for 2 years, however many months. I never touch it. I never took it down. I would never take it down. I would say I'm wrong if I was wrong about it, but that's what happened. Old people and sick people died, and the rest of every 22-year-old dude who doesn't have a pre-existing condition got played.
Right.
So that's my opinion. I think
my son was in school in the fall of 2020, but I'm in Texas.
Right. So I'm in LA and they closed every school and it hurt the kids. And I said it would hurt the kids. And then the LA Unified School District started clapping at me, and I was like, "You guys are idiots. You're hurting kids. You're cowards. Go back to work. Stop being a coward. You're either lying or you're cowards or whatever. Go get to work. The guys at the Trader Joe's are working. Go to school. Go teach your kids." And they started coming after me. And I was like, look, A, what I'm saying is accurate, and then B, you're hurting kids, and then C, everyone's telling me to shut up. I'm like, I don't know what you want to do or who you think I am or historically. And by the way, all they did is applaud every person historically. They did Rosa Parks was told to ride in the back of the bus, but she didn't. It's like, guess where all you off? You're in the back of the bus.
Okay, I don't think we've spoken enough about how these LA fires are racist.
All right. Now, tell me if this would be an unpopular position. Remember when Katrina hit and you had the mayor of New Orleans? I think it was the mayor. I don't think it was the governor. Was it the mayor? Was it Ray Nagy? I'll try to think of that. Don't get me to say his name when I'm drunk. Black guy.
Ray Nagy.
That guy was promising that they were going to keep New Orleans chocolate. Do you remember that clip, Dawson? It was a great clip. Again, this stuff goes way back. It's like race. It's like, all right, it's a black, town. And he was promising that they were going to keep it chocolate. Like, yes, the black folk had to move away into temporary housing, but they were going to come back. We're going to keep it chocolatey, right?
It's nicknamed the Chocolate City speech.
Ah, there you go.
January 16th, 2006.
Oh, man. D- student, but yet remember everything. Never the good times. Never the good times. Only Duke Gallagher talking to my mom. That I remember. Later on, I won Player of the Year. Have no recollection of it. So he gave that speech, and he's like, "Don't worry, everyone's fled, but when we come back, we're going to keep it chocolate." Shouldn't Mel Gibson give a speech about keeping the Palisades white? Like he should go, "Don't worry, don't worry.
Keep the
we're gonna keep it. Forget about the chocolate milk. We're going white instant here, baby. We'll keep it white. Don't worry, because I guarantee New Orleans was more than 1% white when Katrina hit, but they're keeping it chocolate, with probably 20% white. You know what I mean? 1% white Palisades." I say we got a mission, fellas. We got to keep it white.
Oh, my God.
Well, it's a two-way street,
right,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, if keeping it black is noble, then why isn't this? By the way, you always know they're horrible ideas because all you do is flip the script and you go, "Oh, that's horrible," and then you go, "Oh, yeah." Do we have that speech, Dawson? It's pretty good. Now, is he still in prison for money laundering or hammering federal checks and giving it to his brother-in-law? Is this sanctimonious prick still in prison? Or has he been let out? He's been everyone in New Orleans gives their sanctimonious speeches, and then at some point the feds catch up to him. Yeah. All right, here he goes. Sorry.
We as black people, it's time. It's time for us to come together.
Hold on a second.
Speak, son.
When Mel does it, I'm going to have him do it in the Braveheart thing, and I will have white guys behind him. You know what I mean? Going, "Talk, Mel. Say it now." Maybe I'll have Gary Busey back there. He's a Melbourne guy, and he'll just be back there going, "Mel, go! You go, boy! Go, Braveheart!"
What was Mel's, she referenced the conspiracy that he had said. What did he say? What were his comments? That somebody purposely...
I don't know. I think sometimes when someone on their side says something batshit crazy, they'll try to quickly pull out. Like Elon Musk said, to kind of balance out the crazy.
He made an offhanded joke in Joe Rogan, I think, where he just said casually
like, oh, maybe they burned it down to, get us out of there. It was like offhanded sort of.
Megan was assigned to Prison Bureau of Prisons terms, sentence, including possible release date. I don't know if he's out yet. He's supposed to be out.
He was out on house arrest on April 27th, 2020.
What was he arrested for, though? They didn't just arrest him for shits and giggles. Like, he did something. We'll listen to the speech, and then it'll be fun to find out what this guy did.
I like this.
We as black people,
yeah,
it's time. It's time for us to come together. It's time for us to rebuild a New Orleans, the one that should be a chocolate New Orleans. And I don't care what people are saying uptown or wherever they are. This city will be chocolate at the end of the day.
All right, listen, I'm gonna do that with Mel. We'll just swap out chocolate for vanilla, and why not? Anyway, the guy's in prison.
He was convicted on 20 of 21 charges of wire fraud, bribery, and money laundering related to bribes from city contractors before and after Katrina, and was sentenced to 10 years.
Good dude, though. Good dude.
Safety conservation type project that they halted replacing the fire poles with metal fire poles.
Well, not the fire poles. The telephone poles, which catch on fire.
Excuse me, yeah. These poles, to make them fire safe.
Yeah.
So instead of doing that, they stopped, and everybody halted it because of a random shrub that ironically benefits from wildfire.
Look, the fact that it's 2025, okay, there's a physical danger to having the power lines, falling down and electrocuting people or starting fires or what have you. But there's also just a very sort of cosmetic, emotional, sort of urban sprawl kind of thing where it's like it's just wires everywhere. It's kind of a bummer. It looks like shit. Yeah. If you walk outside the studio and look up the street, it's just nothing. It's just endless wires. So it's a safety thing, but it's also just kind of a societal thing. Like, it just looks like shit. And we've been talking about this for a long time. We get taxed a lot in this state. Can we just bury them?
Yeah.
Let's just put them in the ground. Let's stop having all these conversations about replacing poles and this, that, and the other. It's an aesthetic, gross nightmare.
Yeah, my question when it first happened was, why did that never happen? Why? And this answers the question. There's a big problem that they could have retrofit, even though it wouldn't be buried, which I would think that the people, the taxpayers in that area would decide to bury it.
Well, this is sort of what we're talking about, which is the politicians, Sidney Nutjob we just saw, and Karen Bass. This isn't something they're interested in. They're not interested in it. It's not sexy. It's not fun. They don't get to accuse people of being racist. It's nothing they're interested in. Like, honestly, I am interested in it. So if I was a politician, I wouldn't do the.
Okay, I'm a Stephen Miller fan. I think even Mike Enoch said that he couldn't think of anything that he objected to in what Stephen Miller was saying.
Warning about the military-industrial complex, which, if anything, has gotten larger. He didn't seem to have a concern about that, Stephen.
Yeah, hard to put Biden and Eisenhower in the same sentence. Biden is not Eisenhower and doesn't even deserve to be mentioned in his company. It's clear, listening to Biden, and it doesn't bring me any pleasure to say this, that Biden is discovering what he's saying as he's saying it. In his last speech, it's evident, just listening to the way he's delivering it, that he's discovering the words as they are scrolling through the monitor on screen. He has no clue what he's even saying. It's just one more example of the radical staff that have been running this country, the crazy Marxists, on their way out the door, scrolling something in for Biden to say. Let's be very clear about Biden and the tech community, the Democrat Party and the tech community. They directed large corporations to censor American speech, to deplatform President Trump, to restrict the ability of Americans to speak their minds freely on issues of national import, most particularly, as we remember, on the coronavirus.
Yes.
And so this administration, the Biden administration, is the administration of oligarchy. They are the ones who directed and empowered large technology corporations to control American speech and to violate their First Amendment rights. Donald Trump is liberating this country from that odious censorship regime. And one of the first things you're going to see Donald Trump do after he becomes president is end federal censorship and open up.
Right. So there's been one political party in the United States that has passionately made the case for more and more levels of censorship, and there's been the opposing political party, the Republicans, who have consistently opposed it.
Up online to free debate and free expression as our founders would have wanted.
You know, it's ironic when you think about Zuckerberg and the amount of money that he poured into Biden's campaign, and now suddenly he's struck with fear at the relationship that Zuckerberg and Bezos and Musk have with the incoming president. You know, what do you say about these fears that these you know, titans of industry, obviously, you know, some of the most brilliant people that we have in the country, have the ear of the president? And what do you say to those who say that they are concerned about that, Steve?
I return to my previous point. They're concerned that Donald Trump is working with large technology platforms to restore the First Amendment. Could there be a more important thing other than national security and public safety for a president to do than to restore the full meaning, intent, and purpose of the First Amendment to the Constitution? The First Amendment in the Bill of Rights? This is foundational to democracy. President Trump is restoring democracy. He's restoring your right at home to say what you think, what you feel, what you believe, to protest policies you dislike, to support policies that you do like, and to not face deplatforming, debanking, or even worse, direct government persecution. This administration threw an individual in prison for posting a meme online about Hillary Clinton. Doug Mackey, it's a real event that happened. Yeah. A memer has been federally incarcerated. That's not just a slippery slope. You're at the bottom of the slope. That's full-on authoritarianism. President Trump is also working with these same platforms to obtain a competitive edge against every foreign country in our technological dominance, to my point about national security.
I want to talk to you about TikTok, because it's something that at one point, back in July of 2020, President-elect Trump said that he would consider banning. And then it seems like he had a big change of heart on it. Now we see that the CEO of TikTok will be attending on the dais, according to reports, at the inauguration. Why is the president not concerned about China's involvement in this algorithm and the amount of data harvesting that they have access to through TikTok, Stephen?
Well, I mean, first of all, I've got unfortunate news, which is that China has access to our information across multiple vectors, multiple platforms, multiple financial systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have a
so that's the argument that because they already have all your data, you don't have to...
No, quite the opposite.
Okay.
You need a whole of government approach, Martha, analyzing every way in which our data is compromised to develop a comprehensive national strategy to protect Americans' data and protect Americans' privacy without unconstitutionally constraining their ability to conduct free speech online. It is a fact that there are tens of millions of people who engage in the exercise of their First Amendment rights on the TikTok platform. That is a major constitutional issue. A competent executive not only has the need, but the absolute obligation to perform a balancing test to evaluate these complicated questions. And so President Trump is saying that when he comes into office, he needs to have his whole national security team, as well as his legal team, the Department of Justice, develop a strategy to ensure that our data is safe, our privacy is secure across all threats, and not just China, but all foreign countries. But at the same time, we do not give the government awesome, unrestricted, untested, and uncabined powers to severely curtail the ability of Americans to engage with free speech online. Anyone telling you these are easy or simple questions is not being honest or truthful.
No doubt. You know, people have a lot of concern also about the addiction factor in TikTok and the fact that China doesn't allow kids in China to be on TikTok. And, you know, we can get into that side of it another time. I want to put, because it also goes to another huge part of the policy that you'll be working very hard on with regard to our southern border. Watch this.
He has also said illegal immigration is poisoning the blood of our nation. He said that in December 2023. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I am not familiar with that statement, but what I can tell you is I went to the border a few months ago. I went to Yuma, Arizona, and what I saw at that border was horrific, Senator. It was horrific.
So, Stephen, I know you met with House Republicans yesterday behind closed doors about the need to scale up immigration and customs enforcement workforce, and also to, as part of this execution of mass deportation. Can you give our viewers a sense of what that's going to look like on day one?
Yeah, so let me also just make the point that talk about poisoning the blood of our country. Fentanyl is literally poisoning the blood of hundreds of thousands of Americans and leading them to their graves, to their deaths. This is, by any definition, an attack on the United States of America by foreign alien enemies. That is a fact. It is not debatable. As to what President Trump is going to do, first and foremost, he is going to reestablish the principle that the national defense of the United States is contingent upon the maintenance and defense of the national sovereignty of the United States. You cannot be a safe or secure country until the border is protected and defended. That means the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Homeland Security, and all of the relevant law enforcement components therein will be given the assignment and the mission to interdict all contraband, to use all financial resources to strangle the cartels, and to end all illegal immigration into this country as a top national security mission. That is the president's duty, and he will fulfill it.
Absolutely.
And he'll fulfill it with force.
We're going to speak to Dan Crenshaw a little bit later in the hour about that, so I'm glad you brought that up. But I just want to circle back before I let you go. Just a quick question. If the Supreme Court upholds the ban on TikTok, do you believe that President Trump...
Okay, so I can't ever recall Stephen Miller saying something that I disagreed with. I've read many profiles of Stephen Miller. His life has been endlessly chronicled. I can't recall reading anything that disturbed me. He is a great example of someone who's gotten into the dirty world of politics and fought hard for what he believes in and fought effectively. It speaks very well of Donald Trump that he has brought Stephen Miller so close to him and his administration. When Trump was out of power the past 3.5 years, Stephen Miller ran America First Foundation that sued numerous legal companies, law officers for practicing discrimination against white people. He just keeps fighting the good fight. Just incredibly admirable character. And he must have channeled his ambition and his ego in service of something greater than himself. I just never heard anything that bothers me about Stephen Miller. Now, Chris Kobach, right, former chair of the Kansas Republican Party, nationally prominent for his support of anti-immigration advocacy. But when Chris Kobach was thinking of joining the Trump administration, he made all these demands on Trump. He had to have his own airplane. He had to have open office privileges. He just made so many demands that it appeared he wasn't willing to subordinate himself to Donald Trump's agenda. He wanted to enlist Donald Trump in his agenda. So it's like with some 12-step programs I'm aware of. Some people go into certain 12-step programs. I'm going to use this 12-step program to more effectively get out what I want. Doesn't seem to be a strategy that works out, as opposed to I'm going to enlist in this transformational program and allow it to open me up to do the painful soul surgery, and let's see what happens as I come out the other side. So Stephen Miller has enlisted himself in Donald Trump's army, and he seems to be intent on serving Donald Trump's agenda. There's nothing that he does that bothers me. I just think he's admirable and a great example of where you can take your ego and you can take your selfish, self-assertive side and marry it and subordinate it to a cause greater than yourself, as opposed to Chris Kobach, who has received a lot of attention, but does not seem to be particularly practical. Stephen Miller seems to have understood how government works. When I read articles and books that delve into Stephen Miller, I just keep coming away with the impression he did the hard work of understanding how the nuts and bolts of government work, and he has been intent on pulling those levers in service of immigration restriction, in service of squashing illegal immigration, in service of Donald Trump. He's a terrific spokesman for Donald Trump. I just find him highly admirable.
The racial hustling, I'd be a dog with a bone and burying these wires. That's all I would talk about. they are a bunch of dingbat chicks who have no interest in this. So, of course, we don't get the wires buried. And we have a bunch of politicians that are much more interested in saving the milk thistle weed than we do burying the wires.
I'm glad
because
you
they just
mentioned
they don't care.
Karen Bass, the LA Times. Yeah, this is the thistle, if you could see there on the screen. Yeah, it's pretty, you know.
I paid on one of those.
Later on, it'll dry up and catch up.
Exactly right. The LA Times owner says endorsing Karen Bass was a mistake due to incompetence. So that's just going along with what you're talking about, that, yeah, the LA Times kind of took back their endorsement of Karen Bass a little bit too late. And a strange thing, Rick Caruso, all his buildings are alive and well.
Because he got his own private fire detail, or he built them a certain way?
Well, they had it built a certain way, and they also sprinkler systems that engage during this thing. So
that's built a
his
certain
shopping
way.
center is fine.
Yeah, well, that guy wanted to be mayor. So basically, we had a choice, so we're there now. Are we going to be a pragmatic society, or are we going to be an emotional society? And we had a choice a couple of years ago. What was the mayoral thing, Dawson? I mean, 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years
ago.
Yeah.
We had a choice. And one road led to pragmatism. And I'm not even assigning a values judgment to this. It's just one was, I'm super pragmatic. Most women I've been with have been less pragmatic and more emotional, which is better for certain things. You know, they're better huggers. But I've always been pragmatic. I'm more pragmatic than most guys. I know. I'm super pragmatic. I always have been. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that's how I'm wired. Real nuts and boltsy. I used to be a builder, so that's kind of my background. And women are wired a different way. Okay. So 2 years ago, we got to a fork in the road. One was a pragmatic fork, and the other was a more emotional, feel-good, vibes-based, whatever fork. And we, because we're LA and we're California, are not wired for pragmatism, so we went down the emotional road. Karen Bass gave a speech a couple of years ago in front of the big swinging in front of the Democratic whatever party, explaining that, and Dawson, I think we look for this and we could never find it because they scrubbed it, they wouldn't put it there, but she was explaining that the homeless problem was caused by income inequality, which is batshit crazy. It's basically Elon Musk took all the money and now we have people rolling around in their own shit on the streets of downtown Los Angeles. It has nothing to do with income inequality, but she's basically a communist, and she's emotional, and she's non-pragmatic, and she thinks that way. Rick Caruso would have taken a different path to getting rid of the homeless because he's a pragmatic person, but we didn't want that. We didn't want that. We wanted the emotional part. The emotional part goes nowhere and leads nowhere. You feel good that you voted for the person that feels good and it's more emotional and everything else. Meanwhile, 2 years in, more homeless, $24 billion down the fucking drain. Now, what does it take to get from emotional to pragmatic? And the answer is your fucking house burning to the ground. Yeah. That's what does it. It's you getting stabbed by a junkie. It's your daughter getting shot at work on Melrose Boulevard. That gets you from emotional and hypothetical and fantastical to super pragmatic. And that's so now that everything is burned to the ground, we may be ready for something a little more pragmatic and a little less good vibesy.
Yeah, might bring change.
It might.
This might.
Well, they need some change because it's beyond the brink. Data shows the LA Fire Department among the most understaffed in America. The fires swept through, and the reason.
Well, also we have a bunch of unintentional arsonists. Like, imagine if you just went, well, they're not really arsonists. They're just homeless people who like smoking crack, camping in the hills, and they get really fucked up and pass out. They're like, oh, so we have some de facto
accidental.
We have an army of accidental arsonists just sprawled out. You know what I mean?
The other thing about this is, in my personal experience, where you can be a prison firefighter and go cut fire lines and work your sentence off early, but when you get home, you cannot be a firefighter.
Oh, really?
No, you can't.
You're white.
Exactly.
Wait, why would you be in prison? Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, so little pragmatic things like that. Like if you got a lot of experience out in the field cutting fire lines, then you get out and you serve your debt to society. You should be eligible to at least attempt to be a firefighter.
They've taken that away. And, there's just a hiring freeze, I guess. And most of the firehouses are underfunded. They got less than $1,000 of cash on hand. It's been like a systemic problem, even though we all knew that these fires were going to break out sometime in the Santa Ana. But, the leadership fell very short.
Well, where's somebody tweeted me out, Joe, me on stage at Wise Guys like 4 years ago, screaming about Newsom and how California was on fire. I just kept yelling it was on fire, and I was like, when did I say that? I don't remember anything.
It's always on fire.
That was 4 years ago. So the people knew about it. will find 30 seconds of it just to hear me yell fire. But
what's the deal with there's only like 2 planes that pick up the water? Like when there's
We don't
you'd
have
think
them.
there'd be like 10 or 12
Yeah,
planes
we had to
ready to
borrow
go.
one from Canada,
and then the
and,
drone
yeah,
took it
drone
out.
took it out,
Like
yeah.
I'm watching that from New England going, geez, that's only got two planes out there and one's from Canada?
Yeah, so what we do is we spend our money on a lot of shit that doesn't matter, but that's the non-pragmatic. Now, what we just got in the presidential election is the pragmatists won, but California is not that yet.
Yeah.
We'll be the last to get sucked up into whatever's pragmatic. But eventually, at the end of the day, people want their home to not be on fire and they want their streets to be safe.
Yeah.
So they don't even know what the fuck they're doing in California because they want this too. They go, we want good schools and we want safe streets and we want homes to be safe, and yet then they vote for everything that doesn't get them that because they think it feels good.
People that want to destroy it.
Which makes them stupid. Yeah. Was that a tweet that I had? Well, I don't know why. It was just me yelling fire over and over.
In a crowded theater? I thought that was illegal.
None of my shows are
On
crowded,
stage.
man. You know that. You know better than to accuse me of having a crowded room.
Well, here's some good news. Israel and Hamas agreed to hostage release. Yeah, and a Gaza ceasefire deal after 15.
Okay, you heard about Scott Jennings. He is often featured, his clips are featured on X all the time. He is a Republican pundit who appears on CNN.
They need to get the facts
But wait a
right.
second.
Because
But wait.
we were right. And that's always wrong.
It was wrong, but guess what else was wrong? All the polls of 2022. And none of those pollsters are...
They were all wrong. They
and
weren't.
you were wrong in 2022, Scott, because you
No.
said there was going to be a red wave.
I never said that. I never said
Twitter,
that.
do your
I
thing,
never said
run the
that.
clips,
Never
because
said that.
people said that there was going to be a red wave, and there wasn't. And so when you make predictions, which is what we get paid to do, is to read the tea leaves and determine, it is not something that should rise to the occasion of litigation.
You know what, Scott, how many campaigns have you done? I've done 100 million, and probably you have too, right? Every time you get a bad poll, are you supposed to sue the pollster now?
It's not about the poll. It's not about the poll. But look what happened. It came out from a person who has a lot of credibility. Virtually every single panel I was on for the last week of the campaign led with, well, look at this poll out of Iowa. It's the,
Right,
and so
listen.
it wasn't the poll. It's the second, third, and fourth order narrative.
Listen.
Coming out of
I'm
stuff.
sorry.
And it's just
So what? So
free
what?
speech. It's free speech?
What about
Okay.
Scott? I mean, what about free speech? I mean, I thought that this was the Republican Party of say what you want. Let's debate it in the public square. Like, let's have the conversation. Now it's let's only have the conversation if you're 100%, prescient and correct in that moment. It was about.
So Kip says, everything I hear makes me despise LA more. So why is that? It's because you already have a pre-existing mental perspective that you are simply looking for reasons to despise LA or despise other people, despise Republicans or despise white people or Christians or Jews. Right? If you have that mental mindset, you'll be able to find evidence for why you should hate this or that location or this or that group.
A bad poll. It was a wrong poll. The media discussed it. So what?
Do you know what I'm so tired of, Scott? The #1 cable news network, Fox News. The #1 paper by circulation, the Wall Street Journal. #3 paper by circulation, the New York Post. #1 person on the radio, Sean Hannity. The #1 person on the podcast, Joe Rogan. All of these people are Trump supporters. What media are you talking about that's anti-Trump?
You're not familiar with the anti-Trump media?
You're not familiar with the fact that you guys control for everything
of
from
all the
podcasts?
things I've heard you say out here, that might be the nuttiest.
Scott,
I mean, believe me, there's plenty of anti-Trump media.
She's trying to pay you.
I'm trying
to pay conservatives.
what I'm basically trying to say is that you guys have taken over the airwaves. You guys have taken over.
So one realization that I've had over the past year is that the more intense your in-group identity, the more intense your sense of victimization, right? You can't have a strong Jewish, black, white, gay, straight, Californian, Republican identity without simultaneously having a strong sense of victimhood. So with that strong identity comes a strong sense of victimhood, and then you'll have a certain mental slant on reality where you'll find all sorts of reasons to justify your victimhood. If you strongly identify as a Jew, then you can think of all these ways that the world has screwed Jews over. If you strongly identify as a Palestinian, you can think of all these examples of how the world has been cruel to Palestinians. If you strongly identify as black, you can come up with all these reasons for why blacks are victims. And so as we've become much stronger with our various identities in America since the 1960s, what can't help but come with it is a sense of victimization. Now, there is adaptive victimization and there's maladaptive victimization. So if you're living in a big city and you have a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10 sense of victimization for your group, that's not going to be adaptive. On the other hand, if you have a 0 out of 10 sense of victimization with regard to your group, that's not going to be adaptive either, because you simply won't have an intense in-group identity and you won't be able to form bonds with other people who have an intense in-group identity because you're not there. So a moderate sense of victimization that you can control, that you don't inevitably express in inappropriate multicultural settings, such as in the workplace, probably serves you. Right? Someone who is a 10 out of 10 black victimhood identity bloke is not going to do well in a multicultural, multiracial work site. Anyone who's 10 out of 10, 7 out of 10 in their sense of victimhood is not likely to do well in a multicultural, multiracial workplace. On the other hand, 1 out of 10 probably doesn't serve you. So sense of victimhood, somewhere in the range of probably 2, 3, 4 to 5 out of 10, right? That mild to moderate sense of victimhood, right? As long as you don't express it in inappropriate places, that probably serves you. So yeah, Republicans can have a sense of victimhood about the news media, and Democrats can have a sense of victimhood about the news media. And it's not surprising that all these different groups have a sense of victimhood, because you cannot have a group identity without simultaneously having a sense of victimhood. Now, you may have the rare individual who has an intense in-group identity, and they are able to step outside of it while they're doing a live stream to bestow their pearls of wisdom upon you. But the rare individual exception is not what's important. What's important is the rule.
Over the radio airways. You guys have taken over podcasts. You guys have taken over pretty much, I mean, and now you're sitting here complaining because all you guys do is whine and complain. Your entire raison d'etre is have grievances. You don't actually.
Is there any strong identity that doesn't do a lot of whining and complaining? Please name one.
You think about leading, you just think about having grievances against the media.
I'd like
against
to add
anybody
a
who's
grievance
anti-Trump.
if I could.
So do Democrats not have grievances? Do black people, brown people, gay people, white people, Jews, Muslims? Does not every group have a considerable list of grievances? And grievances give you energy, right? You don't want to be, most people don't want to be drinking coffee late at night when they want to go to sleep. But a cup of coffee in the morning seems to have many benefits, such as a surge of energy. So tapping into your grievances can provide you with some energy and some motivation and an opportunity to connect with other people who share your grievances. It's the quickest, easiest way to bond with people is to share grievances.
I can keep going here.
Just another grievance is that Republicans are frustrated. They feel as though the media has been out against them. Some of that is social media, some of that is influencers, some of that is just false narratives. And I think that this poll was just sort of the final.
You're not a bad person if you hate LA. You're not a bad person if you hate this or that outgroup. But there are levels of hatred that I would think would be dysfunctional in certain settings. So if you're fighting for your life against a particular outgroup, then an intense level of hatred would probably serve you. But if you're going through life in a big city and you work in a multicultural, multiracial environment, right, having a 10 out of 10 sense of grievance is probably not going to serve you.
Straw, and people felt like it was somehow deliberate. That there was a deliberate attempt.
That's the word of the day, deliberate. What happens when it was deliberate? That's the whole point that Donald Trump is trying to explore right now. What happens?
Okay, I don't care what Michael Cohen has to say. Let's get another clip here.
I don't know that it has anything to do with the readiness of the fire.
Okay, but here's what I know. When she was cutting the fire department $17 million, she was putting millions more into cannabis regulation. At some point, these decisions about who our leaders are have impacts on real people's lives.
And they signal priorities, because also in California, you might have recall a news story from last year. There was some interest in the fire departments and the firefighters in California. And the interest was that there were too many white men who were firefighters, and we need to have a program in California to make sure we don't have enough white men as firefighters. So we have budget cuts.
Okay, Kip comments, news networks are so geared towards serving dummies. It didn't feel so ignorant when Ted Turner ran things at CNN. So news networks aim for an audience with an average IQ of 100. They often have very smart people who write the news so that it can be understood by people with just an 8th grade education. So just because things are boiled down to a very simple style of communication does not mean that you can't have some intelligent points. It's just that you're strongly incentivized to open up your audience as wide as possible. And perhaps one reason people often seek out podcasts or live streams is because there's a frustration with the low IQ offerings in the mainstream media. So what is going on with Fox News here?
But there's a lot of scapegoating going on. Governor, mayor, fire chief, all kind of on the hot seat here. And one reason why, right? The wildfire budget was cut by the state. Of course, you heard that the city did not pre-deploy resources in vulnerable areas like this one. And now we're hearing that the city had cut the fire department budget, including mechanics. So when off-duty firefighters showed up to respond to an emergency call, there were no vehicles available for them to use.
Many of our rigs that are sitting at our supply and maintenance because we don't have the resources to fix them.
That's LA's fire chief last year begging for more mechanics. Why? When the Palisades fire broke out, every available firefighter showed up, yet many had no pumper truck, engine, or vehicle to use.
So after I finish a typical live stream, I'm exhausted and I'm not up for usually consuming high IQ content or having cognitively demanding interactions for a while. So even above average people with intelligence, they don't want to always be absorbing material that is cognitively challenging. So, right, there's a time and a place for the mid-wit IQ content, and often the challenge of boiling down an idea so that it can be communicated to someone with a 100 IQ is a worthy challenge. So there's a time and a place for challenge, and then there's a time and a place where you just kind of want to lie on your back and allow the news to ride you.
We have $1 million rigs sitting at the yard with no mechanics to fix them.
Many are here, the maintenance yard, where up to 1 in 6 LA fire trucks are broken down, unavailable because the department has no money to fix them.
There's been a 55% overall increase for calls for service.
Compared to other major cities, LAFD is grossly understaffed, far below recommended levels.
We have fewer sworn firefighters today than we had in 2010.
A huge drain on fire resources, the homeless. Last year, LAFD responded to 14,000 fires and 52,000 medical calls.
If we cut one position, if we close one station, if we close one resource, the residents of Los Angeles are going to pay the ultimate sacrifice, and someone will die.
While next year's budget calls for more mechanics and replacement vehicles, the department wants another $5 million for EV charging stations and almost $2 million for a diversity and inclusion plan.
And we are at that breaking point where our firefighters can no longer do more with less.
So firefighters also told us they did not know that massive reservoir was offline. Otherwise, they could have hired private water tenders so they had water in those hydrants to fight the fire. That didn't happen.
So sometimes listening to diversity, equity, inclusion programs is just amusing. But then when you have a time of real emergency, such as now, it's infuriating. Kip says the Sunday TV news shows have smarter content, correct, but the propaganda is dialed up to 10 on those Sunday shows. Yes, agenda-driven media has failed us. 40. The news media is cutting their own throats by being so dominantly on the left. It didn't used to be this ideologically stacked. So I would be surprised if even 5% of elite journalists voted for Donald Trump in the last election. Right? The ideological perspective is just so blinkered against Donald Trump, against the nationalist perspective right now with the news media, and they cut their own throats with ratings and economics and viewership by being so blinkered.
Martha?
All right, William, thank you very much. Let's bring in Michael Schellenberger, founder of Public News. You ran for California governor in 2022 as an independent after
Okay, Scott Jennings is doing the Lord's work on CNN.
And yet, I'm wondering now, if your house was burning down, how much do you care what color the firefighters are?
You can respond, and then
Listen, I am so tired. You know what? There was an article that just came out that said that actually the most educated demographic in this country right now is black women. So let me be clear. Because you are a woman, or because I know that some of the right has been sharing these photos of the fact that I believe that the fire chief may be a woman or something, that has nothing to do with it. We are looking at qualifications. What diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been about is saying, you know what? Open this up. Don't just look at the white men. Open it up and recognize that other people can be qualified.
And I'm open to that being true. It just never seems to empirically work out that way. It's just that those institutions that have the biggest focus on affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion seem to be the least competent. So in theory, she may well be right. It just doesn't practically ever seem to work out that way.
And the fact that we want to, at a time when people are dying, decide that a country of immigrants is failing or people are dying because the same very people that built this country, because the last time I checked, y'all didn't say that anything was wrong with the White House, and I can promise you it was my ancestors that built the White House. So listen, if we have been good enough to build this country, we are good enough to serve and die overseas, we are good enough to serve in other ways. And the fact that people actually decide that they want to engage in public service, whether it's sitting in Congress or whether it's serving on the fire department or the police department, should not be an issue. The fact is, stop trying to act as if only white men are the ones that are capable. Because right now, you're sitting at a table with 3 very capable black women.
I'm not. I'm just simply saying that as a matter of public policy in California, the main interest in the fire department lately has been in DEI programming and budget cuts, and now we have this massive fire.
Are we really, but Scott, are we really blaming the fire department? The people in the LA fire department.
No, I'm blaming the Democrats who run the state.
No, but the fire department right now, they are dealing with a historic fire, okay?
And they have terrible leadership.
That is caused by climate, by the fact that it is extremely dry in the state of California, and they are fighting it in tropical force winds in that state. So how is it anything to do with DEI? How is it anything to do with the fire department at all? They are doing their very best as far as I know.
The fire department is not doing a good job. No. What, is it the water that's the problem? It's the fire department is the problem? Is it a $17 million budget cut to an $800 million budget? I don't think that those are the issues that have caused this horrendous fire, the wildfires that are in California at this time. And to bring DEI into this so early, I mean, how long have we been talking and you already came in with the DEI? Oh my God, you didn't even give us.
I mean, if I were you, I wouldn't want. If I were trying to defend California Democrats, I wouldn't want to hear me talk about it either. But the fact is, this has been mismanaged from a public policy perspective from top to bottom.
I don't think this is about California Democrats, but I do think, to the Congresswoman's point, it's very telling that whenever you're talking about a woman, the fire chief being a woman or the mayor being a woman, it's always DEI. Why does DEI not ever come into play when you're talking about a white man?
No, let's be clear, though. It's not. It's wonderful that the fire chief is a woman. I don't think if she is capable.
I didn't bring that up.
Yeah, if she is capable, I don't care what gender she is. I don't care who she loves. I don't care what pigment her skin is. If she's willing to go save somebody's life in somebody's house, good on her. The reason Scott brought up diversity is that just like your budget tells people what your priorities are, what you talk about in your bio, what you talk about on your website, what you emphasize in recruitment helps people understand what are your priorities in the organization.
They are putting their lives on the line.
And they're incredible.
As we speak.
And they're incredible.
Okay?
So and they should welcome
the political leaders aren't, the firefighters are.
I'm talking about the firefighters, okay? The ones who are recruited, the black ones, the brown ones, the women, they are all there on the line right now.
All right, just because you're putting your life on the line doesn't mean that you're excellent. And why don't we talk about DEI when white men are in charge? Because DEI policies don't promote white men. All right, DEI policies, affirmative action policies, are about promoting people who are not white. So what makes Scott Jennings so good at this, right? He doesn't lose his temper. He's affable. He's tranquil. And he just keeps
Speaker, a point of order.
No. That's not what happened.
They
tried to stop the counting of the votes.
taking flagpoles and taking weapons and bursting into the Capitol to try to stop or delay or obstruct the certification of election. That has never happened before.
They have tried to stop the electoral college.
I heard you doing this earlier today, and I thought by tonight maybe you'd sort of give this one up. I get what you're trying to do here, and it's a hard job you have. But there is no comparison. There is no comparison. And as Adam says, history will remember this correctly for several reasons. There are thousands of videos of what happened on that day. There are videos that the insurrectionists themselves took.
Right. Insurrection is just a hysterical word to use for a riot. Kip served in our armed forces. He says the government had no problem stuffing us into basic housing. The homeless too good to live in mass tent encampments. They make homelessness too fun. So one challenge with dealing with homelessness is how do you do it without incentivizing more people to be homeless or to stay homeless, right? The more resources, the more you give to the homeless, right? The more you're incentivizing people to take up homelessness. You want to disincentivize that kind of antisocial behavior. This is S.E. Cupp here, longtime Republican conservative, but very much anti-Trump. I interviewed her for my blog a few years ago.
There are CC videos, there are reporter videos, news cameras, videos inside the Capitol, outside the Capitol. We know exactly what happened. So to the Mike Collinses of the world, all I would say is, do you want to be on the right side of this in the history books, or do you want to be the villain in this story? Because in 100 years, your great-great-grandkids are going to know you as the wrong side of this issue, not the right side. And how is that going to feel? Because you can whitewash it as much as you want in the moment. There is no confusion.
There's nothing compelling about an argument. Do you want to be on the right side of history? We have no idea what the direction of history will be. It's only people on the left who make this argument.
None as to what happened. And it is not the same as someone on the House floor.
So I asked S.E. Cupp, who's been on TV for about a decade now, how do you feel when men look at you with lust? And she said it made her feel awful, just disgusted.
Or raising their hand and saying, I have a question about this vote.
That's not what happened on the House floor. They tried to stop the counting of the electoral votes in every election.
Wait, wait, Scott.
Yeah.
I was there, man. So
when Al Gore certified the election, he did not even allow them to make the point of order. It was out of order.
How many weeks did he hold up the counting of the votes?
This is why.
You didn't hold up for recount.
We probably won't be able to move on from January 6th. You're my friend, but I know you're smarter than that. I know that you're smarter than comparing what happened.
The country has already moved on.
No.
It's everybody today that's having a meltdown that hasn't moved on.
Trump keeps bringing it up.
If people see reality differently from you, it has nothing to do with their level of intelligence, all right? It has to do with their hero system, their mental prism. It's not because they're not smart enough to see things the same way you do.
We're not having a meltdown. We watched the vice president do her job, just as we had to wait 14 hours, but nonetheless watch Mike Pence do his job. And just as we commended Mike Pence for having the courage to stand up to Donald Trump, it takes when people lose, whether you're a child or an adult, it's hard to lose. That's why you don't want to be a loser. And
that's why Donald Trump couldn't
do it. That's why we actually are here, is because he couldn't be an adult. He couldn't stand up and say, you know what? The country is bigger than me. The voters decided 4 years ago, and today he still hasn't done it. Now, you can try and compare two.
So this woman has some good points. What the Republican rioters did on January 6, 2021 was disgusting. And it is to the Democrats' credit that they have not tried to contest this last election. Kip says people on EBT, meaning food stamps, have proven to have an inability to budget correctly, yet the government lets them spend that food stamp money on sushi, steaks, all sorts of things that ordinary people might struggle to pay for. Yeah, we shouldn't incentivize bad behavior.
2000 and 2004 and 2000, but that's not the same. And I know deep down inside that you also know that what happened on January 6th, we have never seen anything like that in our lifetime, and God hopes we never do, and that was not what happened.
Okay, as far as January 6th or any other event, there are some ways that it was different from similar events, and there are other ways that it's similar. Right? You can always find ways that a text or an event is similar to something that happened preceding it and ways that it is similar.
Look, we can just over again. I do want to say, I remember 2000, and I remember Al Gore going through that process of trying to get a recount.
Okay, Scott Jennings, it's cool to be Republican again. So, yeah, he always looks happy. It speaks well of him.
See someone
okay,
that's
hold on this
ill.
side of the table. I want to bring in the politics of this because when I hear lawmakers hailing Penny as a hero, as a good Samaritan, really being promoted, can you help me understand the thinking? Just we started at the top of the show talking about the killer of the United Healthcare CEO being hailed in similar terms.
Yeah, let me just help you understand. If you're on the American left tonight, here's my chart. The good guys today, Daniel Penny. The bad guys, Luigi Mangione. It seems to me.
How do you?
Everybody
what's
on the
the
left,
chart for victims?
I'm just telling you what I see out in the world.
I know. I just want you to finish the
today.
chart. Which victim is good and which victim is bad?
What I'm telling you is
that's not on the second page.
People on the left can't
Scott,
seem to tell the difference between the good guys and the bad guys.
People on the left. I'm asking you whether you consider this person.
We had people praising Luigi.
I want to know whether you think that, as Congressman Crane does, that Daniel Penny.
Right. The reason that there might be a different perspective on who's the good guys and who's the bad guys, who are the bad guys, is that we have different hero systems and we prioritize different forms of harm. So for people on the left, they react to the crazy homeless guy who was strangled by Daniel Penny and ended up dying, and their heart goes out to that crazy homeless guy. People on the right, their heart goes out to those who use public transportation and are continually threatened by mentally ill homeless people. Right? When you know that someone's mentally ill, they are far more dangerous to you than if they're not mentally ill. Right? The mentally ill are incredibly dangerous. Schizophrenics, in particular, about 100 times more likely to murder you than those who aren't schizophrenic.
Penny should get the Congressional Gold Medal to recognize his heroism. I'm not asking you about anyone else.
I think he ought to get medal. I think they ought to build a statue of this guy in New York City.
I think that race, and I'm going to say it. I'm going to say the dreaded R word. Race plays a role in this, right? And so we see it. Yes, absolutely, because the
Yeah, so if different groups commit different levels of murder and violent crime, then how could group differences not play a role?
Wasn't there a similar case in New York City at the same time this was going on?
That when people kill people who are white, they tend to get harsher sentences, especially if they're people of color.
What about the Jordan Williams case?
That is what happens in our criminal justice system.
First of all,
no, I'm not going to stop because race absolutely plays a role in this.
I said, what about the Jordan Williams case here in New York? Same situation, African-American, gets on a subway, ends up killing a guy, grand jury tosses it out at the exact same time as the Penny case.
What about
but
Bernard
That's different because he used the same weapon that the alleged.
Okay, no, don't pop another video on me. Come on. Autoplay Rumble. All right, back to Kip's commentary. Providing freebies to illegal migrants such as housing, food, money has ticked off half the country. Not sure our leaders realize the ire they have caused. Our leaders in government are out of touch with the struggles of real people. There is revolution in the air. The unrest is bigger online, but it's there in real life too. Well, this is a large part of the reason that Donald Trump was elected. So let's get
I don't know that it has anything to do with the readiness of the fire.
Okay, but here's what I know. When she was cutting the fire department $17 million, she was putting millions more into cannabis regulation. At some point, these decisions about who our leaders are have impacts on real people.
Okay, I played that already. Here he is on why people voted for Trump.
I'll tell you what I think it is. People are sick and tired of fake, inauthentic politicians who can only operate off of a script, who are being handed things by consultants, whose every movement and facial expression is rehearsed. And the thing that Trump and AOC have in common is that they both appear to be authentically speaking what's on their mind and what's in their heart at any given time. It's as plain as day. the rejection of the political class in favor of the authentic class. And sometimes they're contradictory, and sometimes they say things that make you lift an eyebrow, but that's the thread.
And the comment in the chat, is the chat been dead for an hour? Bro, the chat is going on in our hearts, in our minds, in our text messages, right? The chat isn't just the chat that's on YouTube, right? The chat goes on, bro. Right? The most important chats are the chats that we're all having with our higher power. So interesting, long, thoughtful profile of Scott Jennings here. And Daily Caller is from Kentucky. He's a Christian. He was in the Bush administration. What mind-blowing analysis do I have for you here? All right. During times of crisis, it is helpful to learn the Alexander technique.
Hello, Gita. I'm Diana. Would like to introduce some Alexander principles to you. So would you show me how you would just sit down and stand up? Just in your way. All right.
This is Alexander Technique ASMR. It has over 6 million views. Some people just keep watching it because they find the teacher's voice so pleasant. Her name is Diana Devitt Dawson.
And then standing up. And are you at the computer quite a lot?
Yes.
For
8 hours a day.
8 hours a day, okay. And you're studying
law.
Okay, then and it's full on for you.
That's right.
Not much reflection on perhaps how you're sitting at the computer, just getting in and doing it, perhaps getting what you have to do done.
That's correct.
All right. Just stand in front of the chair again. Where the Alexander re-education or pointers, or the Alexander technique as a lesson is referred to, it can help you pay attention to you during the act of whatever it is you're doing. Sitting at a computer, going for a swim, riding your bike, you are conscious of a particular area that brings into balance the whole organism. And it really is the head-neck-back relationship. So that sort of simplifies it, if you like. And the little guiding orders are, let the neck be free of unnecessary tension, that's understood. To let the head balance up on the neck's not leaning forward, so that the spine can lengthen during the act of whatever you are doing, and the shoulders can soften and widen out. Softening.
So when you think about these Alexander technique directions, you can't simultaneously be thinking about your rage and resentment. You can't be regretting the past. You can't be filled with fear of the future. So if you're just catching a ball or engaged in some firsthand experience that you can't get distracted from, right, it brings you into the present moment. When we're in the present moment, we tend to behave and move and to think and to feel much more effectively and efficiently, as opposed to being lost in the past or dreaming about the future.
Widening out across the whole torso, widens. Now I'd like you to just sit down again, as you did, and then if you stand up again. So in light of what I just was talking about then, the head-neck-back relationship was very much jeopardized. Our head weighs about 4.5 kilos. That's a lot, sitting on a little neck. And we would rather it not go back and down when you sit down, because it just puts the spiral and the compression, I should say, rather than the spiral, all the way down your back. It also, for women, interferes with our pelvic balance, and to not least of all, the feet. Our feet are not going to be grounded if the head...
Right, the more weird interfering tension patterns you have, the more likely you are to get triggered, the more likely you are to be ill at ease in life, with yourself, with other people. Right, the more pain and compression and distorting tension patterns you have, the more that the world will shrink and shrink and shrink, the more difficulty you'll have interacting with others, the more tempted you will be to reach for something to make the pain and dysfunction go away. Right? If you're stiff in your body, right, you're much more likely to be stiff in the way that you relate to yourself and others. If you're tense and tight and compressed and distorted in your body, that's going to affect how you think, how you feel, how you relate to yourself and to other people.
Is kept throwing back and disturbing the pelvic balance. Now, I'm going to guide you into the chair this way with those principles so you can think about them during the act of actually using.
So when you're teaching the Alexander technique, you're teaching principles. It's not primarily about how awesome I am as a teacher or my super swift moves here or there. It's about effectively transmitting these principles for more effective and gracious movement.
Them, if you like. So you'll be doing the thinking and I'll be doing the moving of you, just to, in a general act of sitting down. We do it all day long, sitting down and standing up. We don't pay attention to this. Now stand with your feet a little bit wider apart, just to give you some grounding, about hip width, a little bit wider. Not much, that's fine. So now we think, I'm going to sit down. All you have to say to yourself is, wait a minute, not my old habit. Allow the neck to be free, the head to balance up, which it is. And Alexander clarified that a little. He said, allow the neck to be free, the head to balance forward and up during movement, and you just bend your knees quite quickly. And then we wait for a moment, and then we just gently come back, just sitting quietly. Yep, that's it. So that during that act, we're going to not put compression on this back, so that you allow what those last words, those little last guidelines say. Allow neck to be free, the head to balance up, the spine to have its length, the torso to widen, which is certainly what it's doing now. And then you've got a lovely breath. By a lovely breath, I mean what Alexander called full capacity breathing, where natural breathing. It's where the lungs are getting air down to the bases of the lungs. It's not just upper respiratory, panic attack type, nervous situations. We can always come back to the inhibition of Alexander's lessons, learning to stop the automatic response to a stimulus. And we have the guidelines, lovely little guidelines. Allow neck to be free, the head to balance up, which it is. Your torso's lengthening, softening and widening. All that is taking place. So why should that be disturbed? Simply because you bounce out of a chair. We just do it unconsciously. Up goes the chin, crunch goes the head, and we stand up all day long. Terrible, terrible.
So everything that you want to learn about the Alexander technique, you can learn through that kind of chair work, because they're such intense stimuli operating when you fold and unfold your limbs, getting in and out of a chair, that you can learn to notice what are your habitual reactions to a stimuli, and then start letting go of those responses that don't serve you, such as tensing and pulling down and distorting your musculature. I remember when I first took Alexander lessons, I was throwing myself forward to get out of the chair. Like, I had all sorts of weird interfering tension patterns going on. And as I started taking Alexander lessons and enrolled in an Alexander Technique teacher program, people steadily found me just easier to deal with. I was more calm, more smooth, less herky-jerky. I was increasingly at ease with myself, with reality, with other people. I engaged in less gross attention grabbing. I was less likely to be blatantly out of touch with the reality of the social situation in which I was in. So people in my life found me much easier to deal with once I started learning the Alexander Technique. And one of the great things about being an Alexander Technique teacher is that you have great people as clients. So people tend to take Alexander Technique lessons for one of three reasons. They have chronic pain due to dysfunctional tension, compression, disfiguring patterns, or people want a higher level of performance. They want to be more effective actors, public speakers, or they want to engage in personal growth and to learn more about how they work and to notice the interfering tension patterns that are holding them back in life. when you notice how you habitually respond to a stimuli, you're opening up space to have different reactions to what life throws at you.
Compression, unconsciously. With this work, you're not doing that, so this becomes so strong and very flexible, and you become free of a lot of harmful habits. For me to help you, or
so I've had students who are billionaires, I've had students who are grade A models, I've had students who are working actors on TV and Broadway. You get to meet an interesting group.
To help you get that experience, we'll just stand up. To allow now to before we stand up, it's an idea to bring the feet underneath you just a little bit more, and then we just wait. Come.
So this is not instruction about how to get in and out of a chair, right? This is instruction about noticing one's own habitual reactions to the stimulus of folding and unfolding one's limbs as one gets in and out of a chair, noticing your reactions and learning to let go of those reactions that don't serve you, such as unnecessary tension and compression.
I'm quiet, not getting ready to push, because I don't want the attention to the legs. That's your stand. It's already in the brain mechanisms that you're about to stand. We don't have to do any more than that. It's there. What we do have to do is prevent the head, the habit. Allow neck to be free, head to balance. Beautiful. And then I know, watch the chin. That's going to work. A little bit of arms coming forward, but that's all right. We gently let the head float up again. Yes, 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 yes. And up you go. Lovely. Strengthening, letting the back lengthen. Torso.
And Kip says it'd be more useful on the mean streets of LA to learn MMA, mixed martial arts, rather than the Alexander technique. Well, the percentage of your time when you need to implement mixed martial arts is like 0.001. So most of the time you'd be far better off learning the Alexander technique, right? It's very rare that you're called upon to defend yourself with mixed martial arts.
So to soften and widen. And widen. Beautiful. Just quiet. Yes. Nice. See, that's, you're not trying to breathe there, it's just happening. Quite naturally and quite deeply.
So when you are tuning into a technique that wants to instruct you how to breathe, right, you're departing from the Alexander technique. The Alexander technique is primarily a technique of subtraction. You are taking away the things that you do that interfere with your best functioning.
That's very.
So as an Alexander technique teacher, you're trying to impart principles, and if you can impart them in a calm and calming and low-key manner, they are going to be more effective and more easily taken in than if you do it in a herky-jerky manner. So among the most important principles of Alexander technique are instructions to notice when you unnecessarily tighten and compress and to let them go. And so when you think your internal directions, you want to think them to yourself in a gentle fashion, because if you are berating yourself, I must stop holding one shoulder higher than the other, I must stop contorting my neck, I must stop stiffening my spine, right? That doesn't work. Instead, you want to have a gentle delivery for your instructions, and how you deliver these instructions to yourself is probably more important than the instructions themselves. So I want to be free. I want my neck to be free. I want my head to release forward and up. I want to allow my shoulders to release to the sides. I want my back to lengthen and broaden. And you want to deliver these instructions as gently as if you're wishing for tomorrow to be sunny.
Nice. To sit down. It's not about sitting and standing, really. It's about looking after this. Neck is free, head balancing up. Let me move you. You're going to send the knees just that way.
So when we learn something new, such as the Alexander technique, we always try to compare it to something else that we're familiar with, but that's quite hard to do. So usually a student will regard this kind of chair work as learning how to stand up and sit down. But no, it's about reprogramming one's responses to a stimulus.
Free neck, head balancing up. What, 2 seconds? That was sort of going down. I want you to think like a kite. Your head's follow there's a little guiding direction in my hands. So I want you to, like a kite, to think.
So as an Alexander Technique teacher, you want to be spending most of your mental attention looking after yourself, noticing if you're freeing up your own neck, your own back, your own shoulders and hands, because any tension and compression that you've got going on with you will translate to the pupil, right? Any dysfunction in your emotions, in your thinking, that's going to translate into your teaching. So when you're doing this hands-on work, the most important thing is to be taking care of yourself, freeing your own neck, directing your own neck forward and up. So I'll often step away from the hands-on work, think my directions, free neck, head rising forward and up, my back lengthening and widening, and then return to the student. So when I teach an Alexander lesson, probably 70% of my mental power goes to my own internal directions, and only 30% goes on to the student.
Up, and your spine is going to be the tail of the kite floating up and not sticking. The bottom doesn't have to stick out. It's the knees that float as they just bend. But
the Alexander Technique teachers tend to be an eccentric bunch because most people come to embrace the Alexander Technique from a place of great pain. And so the type of people who have been living with great pain, usually they played a huge role in developing and creating this inescapable prison of their own habits that produce just so much unnecessary pain. And the type of people who fall into this prison of one's own unnecessary tension and compression, right, they tend to have been living in a way that's not particularly adapted to their best interests.
Neck free, head forward, and then you just bend your knees quite quickly. That's it.
And the chat says, I bet all these people sleep with their necks oriented one specific way at night. No, it's not about specific alignment. It's about a direction. And Alexander Technique really doesn't have much to say about how you sleep. Right. Obviously, you don't want your pillows aligned in a way that causes you to wake up with neck pain.
And then to stand, we go no, quiet, neck free, stay back in your back, and up to go up. And then we wait, soft legs, even if we just flash on all the areas, allowing neck to be free.
So about 2/3 of Alexander Technique teachers are women.
Head to balance up. Letting the torso lengthen, soften, and widen. And widen. That's it. And wide. So you can allow your neck to be free. During the movement, I want you to come into that hinge. That's lovely. And bend the knees quite quickly. Well done. That was easier, wasn't it? Yes. Lovely. Relax. And then you stop. So it's not about... I'm not interested in the movement per se. I'm interested.
So when you let go of these distorting tension patterns, all right, your emotions seem to feel freer and cleaner. Your thinking becomes less distorted. Your relationship with yourself becomes more graceful, and your ability to relate to other people becomes more effective.
In where your thinking is, letting the neck be free. I know the movement will be very much in balance if the thinking is there.
I know Jordan Peterson says clean your room, but perhaps what's even more important is clean up your own relationship to yourself by noticing inappropriate and maladaptive habits that you have of reacting to stimuli in life. So even more important than cleaning your room can be cleaning up your unnecessary tension and compression patterns that interfere with your best functioning and your most graceful movement through life.
That links that. It's just lovely. Go to get up? No, not my old way. Yes. Beautiful. It gives a flow to the whole being. Up you go. And it's effortless.
So if I meet a husband and wife, let's say they're both 50 years of age or 60 years of age or 70 years of age, the wife will inevitably be more in touch with her body and move more gracefully than the man, because men, particularly in the middle and upper classes, they spend a great deal of their time engaged in abstract tasks. And the more you live in an abstract world, the more likely you are to get out of touch with your body. So I noticed that men tend to have far more disfiguring muscular tension patterns compared to women. Women seem to intuitively grasp the principles of Alexander technique much more quickly than men. Also, young people tend to pick it up much more quickly than older people. And one of the most distorting objects that corrupt people's posture is the chair. So you see kids at age 5 or 6, they move beautifully and freely. And then each year that they are in school, and the more time they spend sitting down, right, the more distorted and malfunctioning their tension patterns become. So often by the age of 18, they absolutely look like a wreck.
You really didn't need much there at all. And to think I've not seen you before in all of this new experience is very good. It's cool. Quiet.
So people prefer to do things that more immediately, viscerally make sense. So people love to try to go to yoga to fix something in them because they feel like, now I can work directly on my problem. So Alexander technique is indirect. It's a technique of subtraction. So it's not a set of procedures. It's not a set of exercises. Oh, I'm going to focus on my right shoulder that is just too tense. It's about noticing those habits which begin in the mind. So it is cognitive, it's neurological re-education. And the re-education follows a practice of subtracting needless habits of tensing and compressing.
Because it's going into the unknown when we come along for an Alexander lesson. You know, we're going away from our habit, and all of a sudden we're focusing on this instrument. It's very important. So when you're cycling, when you're cooking, which is what you also enjoy, I believe, very important that you be very creative in how you're using your head, neck, and your back. And hopefully, Alexander, this tiny little introduction will give you the real conscious awareness that, yes, you can stop and say, wait a minute, that preparatory work of looking after you, just a free neck, just free shoulders. When we hold the bicycle wheels, we don't have to clench, just in readiness, just enough. Neck.
So you can bring the Alexander technique to everything in life. You can bring it to your sex life. So instead of tensing and compressing towards your orgasm, you can open up to your orgasm. So you'll have a much more refined touch as you learn the Alexander technique, as you let go of your layers of unnecessary muscular tension, as you let go of this unnecessary body armoring. When you touch other people, it will be much more pleasant. There are some people, and they touch you, and it's just immediately icky because they've got all these weird interfering tension patterns. But when you study the Alexander technique and let go of these icky, maladaptive, pulling down, distorting tension patterns, it makes your touch, your speech, your movement, your thinking, and the flow of your emotions much more pleasing, both for yourself and for other people. So here's Brian McClanahan on the Great MAGA Schism.
I have a report on that, which is something else that I'll be talking about. Next week's probably going to be pretty full with some reports on the inaugural. But this really is a battle over what American conservatism means. Is it simply a politically expedient thing to gain power, which is what the Democrats always are? And I will say that I think there is something to that with the Trump administration. It's simply a means to gain power. I do believe Trump wants to do certain things in office. He doesn't need the job. He doesn't, at all. Doesn't need it. He already was something famous before he became president. He's got real issues, I think, in terms of his personality. He is a bombastic New Yorker who has said a lot of really ridiculous and silly things in his life. But there's also a lot of people that have faith in Trump that he's going to go in and drain the swamp, clean things up in Washington. I'm still skeptical any of that happens. It's simply because there's so many headwinds. You've got reports now that nearly 80% of federal employees, or maybe higher, are going to do all they can to oppose the incoming Trump administration. Well, because you have civil service. And they can do that, right? And of course, we know this is what Hamilton talked about. in the 18th century. You want loyalty? Pay people. Pay them to be loyal. Give soldiers jobs and they'll be loyal. That's what happens, right? I mean, why are these people loyal? Because they depend on the federal government for their paycheck. And if Trump's going to talk about cleaning this thing up or draining this out or doing it, a lot of these people are going to lose their jobs. So, of course, they're going to oppose him. If we're going to get rid of the Department of Education, that means jobs are going to get lost. Jobs are going to get transferred. We know that what they're talking about doing, though, is not simply, they're not eliminating these things. They're just transferring it around. It's moving the deck chairs on the Titanic, because that's really what happens when the federal government talks about getting rid of stuff. There was a piece I thought about doing on Max Boot, who is complaining that we don't spend enough on the Defense Department. We need actually spending about $1.4 trillion on defense if we're going to keep up with the Chinese, right? So you've got all these very weird things with the court. These are court people. Elon Musk is a courtier. This is what he is. He's learned how to cozy up to power so that he can make money and get his way. He did it with Obama. He's doing it with Trump. It's the same thing. Bannon likes the opportunity to be in the court. He's a courtier as well. He's going to use populist rhetoric. But
so Ron Jeremy apparently did some bad things. Rape is bad. But on the other hand, when he was younger, he could suck his own dick. So think about the freedom from unnecessary tension and compression that would allow this man to perform such a feat. So we can say rape bad, but wow, he could suck his own dick.
Bannon is interested in power and influence. That's what these people want. The central authority is a way to get it. Who is more sincere? I don't know. I mean, Bannon actually, again, went to prison for his place. And Bannon says a lot of stupid things about Lincoln and others. I mean, the Abbeville Institute, we're running a piece this week on Bannon. Is he really that, he's from the South, but he's really that interested in the Southern, is the Southern tradition MAGA, which the piece clearly comes down the side of this. Not really. I mean, there's so much more to this. But the thing that's really interesting about this, I think, is that we've got a brewing battle over immigration. Trump has said, I'm going to have birthright citizenship. I don't think Musk is against that. But where Musk and Trump are maybe in line is through the work visas that Musk wants to bring in, because he wants to import employees. And Bannon is saying this is going to hurt American jobs. We've got Americans out here who could take these jobs. Why are we importing people? Of course, this is Vivek Ramaswamy, who is saying, well, American culture is not conducive to good, high-paying workers in these sectors, which, of course, is not true. We do know that American culture has, at times, favored mediocrity over something else, and that is true. But we do know there's a lot of good American workers out there, smart people that could have those jobs, too. I mean, this is really interesting. So this is kind of a personality clash, I think, in many ways. And Bannon is feeling slighted because he was the guy. Now he was the man. Now he's not the man anymore. Musk is the man. Musk is living at Mar-a-Lago, and Bannon is out. So it is kind of, that's my best friend. No, that's my best friend, kind of thing with Donald Trump. And Trump doesn't care. Trump likes this kind of stuff. He wants people to fawn over him and think that he's great and fight for his affection and his attention. That's what he wants. Yeah, that's Trump. Can Trump do some good things? Sure. I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed in what Trump actually does, though. I mean, look, he's going to issue a whole lot of executive orders. They're all going to be challenged. The left is already gearing up for lawfare. I talked about that before. This is the thing. What is Trump going to do on day one? Well, he's going to do a lot. And I think that the executive orders that are there are going to be really interesting. How the left reacts is going to be interesting. We know that Ron DeSantis is already preparing the state for deportations. He's saying, okay, this is where I said Trump is going to go to his loyal places. Florida is going to be one of the first places that Trump uses as an example of how they're going to round up illegal aliens. Criminals primarily is what they're going to go after first. They're not going to go after the families and anything else home. And I know he said these things, but they're going to go after the criminals first because it's optics. And they're going to use loyal states like Florida or Alabama. Maybe even, I don't know about Georgia. That would be one that would be interesting. But they're going to use those kind of states, right? Maybe Mississippi, deep red states. And Florida is a deep red state now. They're going to go after these states and they're going to round people up and they're going to send them out. And they're going to Texas. This is going to be examples. And then if they can pull it off there, and there's some momentum, and Americans say, yeah, look at these criminals, look at these, MS-13 members they're rounding up and shipping out. Look at these bad guys they're getting rid of. We want that in our state, too. The California wildfires, as horrible as they have been, and all the people bloviating about climate change, it's not climate change. This is dereliction of duty by the government and cleaning up brush and other things and causing problems with the fire department. All of that stuff, it's incompetence in California. You've got a lot of Republicans out there now saying, well, gosh, maybe leftist policies are failing us. I think Gavin Newsom is done. And people are really irritated about these policies. So if they say look, we're cleaning up crime, we're doing stuff, this is exactly what MAGA needs. But you've got this schism over these kind of issues. And the left loves this stuff because of distraction. Now, what I would say is that Musk and Bannon should have kept this behind closed doors. But they're two big, oversized personalities, and they're just not going to do it. You need to keep these disputes in-house as much as possible because, again, the left is going to run with it, and they're going to take it. This is red meat for them. Oh, look at this. Now, as I said, this is a brewing war. What is American conservatism? What does it mean? Is it Lincolnian? Is it Southern? Because it can't be Lincolnian and Southern at the same time. Is it kind of country club, conservatism with a twist, which is what I think Elon Musk is. Is it 19th century Republican Party tariffs, bounties, state capitalism with, prohibitions on immigration? Because that's kind of what Trump is. Is it middle 20th century New Dealism? Because Trump is kind of that too. What is it? What is it? Is it, Ronald Reagan-esque? No. I mean, I think right now there really is a battle about what all this Trump stuff means. 4 years ago, I threatened to write a book on this. What is MAGA? What is this thing? What is the intellectual background of this thing? Where does it come from? The historical side of it. Because I think that's certainly interesting. You've got certain components of this. You've got the immigration side. You've got the tariff side, or the state capitalist side. You have people, of course, in the Trump orbit that are pushing for more federalism. And Trump has signaled that maybe he like that. But then you also have the cult of personality around Trump, which certainly goes back to a different kind of Republican Party, someone more like Teddy Roosevelt or Abraham Lincoln. Even though Lincoln had a lot of opponents, but there is certainly a cult of personality after Lincoln's death in what he meant. The radicals, ran with Lincoln's image, were Lincoln, even though they hated the guy. But they certainly used him.
All right, let's get a burst here. Commentary Magazine podcast on the Pete Hegseth hearings, the hostage deal in Israel.
Well, for example, paying higher taxes is a form of patriotism. But I think as a piece of rhetoric, this was a bizarre, like the first half was written by an AI, and the second half was written by
So this is commentary on Biden's speech.
Laura Lewis and Al Newhart in the 1970s. Like, take the worst kind of, what's wrong with our country? It's this thing called artificial intelligence. And social media aren't doing fact checking. But it was 17 minutes that puts paid on this administration in the sense that I believe that this is the last that we're going to hear from Joe Biden. I mean, Adam Schiff says to her, "Are you going to prosecute Liz Cheney?" And she's like, "Why aren't you asking me why crime is up in your state by 27%?
Right.
And he's like, "You're not allowed to talk to me like that effectively." Right. He keeps talking over her, and she's like, "I don't know. I'm not answering your questions. Why don't you ask the right questions?"
Well, and reminding him that he was censured for some of his remarks. That was actually
I just thought it was interesting because it's like, okay, you know what? Maybe all of the civility stuff, and the kind of the fake civility of the Senate hearing, could use a little barnacle scraping.
Right. Right. And you saw the same dynamic with Hegseth in his hearing.
Yeah.
So, all right. So so maybe they shouldn't pack 6 in one day. Let's spread them out so we can actually watch these.
You can watch them and enjoy it like gladiatorial combat. Yeah.
She did not. She weaseled her way out of answering the questions about the work she did on sort of denying the last election. And that was the part where I really did think she came across as not reliable. And I wish she had better answers for those questions. She worked on those cases. She knew that.
She didn't have better answers because there are no better answers than the answers she gave, which is she didn't want to say that she didn't do it. And she didn't want to say that Trump won in she did not want to say that Trump won in 2020, and she didn't want to say that Trump won in 2020. And so that's where, but in the end,
she saw a lot of things, though.
Oh, yes.
She saw things.
Boy,
but I mean, there's one thing, which is, this is a relatively new thing in American history, like the hearing, the public hearing. Often people did not actually have hearing. There were no hearings. They would just be voted up and down, or they couldn't get to Washington, because they were like riding on a horse from Kentucky when they were having their confirmation hearing. Somebody else would sit in for them or answer questions. This is, again, kind of a television era.
Okay, Kip says America is driving over a financial cliff. This is an obsession of cliffs. So by comparison to whom? Right? Who do you think is just so much better off? When nobody is willing to buy our treasuries, it's over 40. You think people buy our treasuries as an act of kindness, as an act of compassion. It's an act of charity. People buy U.S. government treasuries because it's the best of the available options. I bought U.S. government bonds, I think the I bonds, because I was guaranteed a return over the rate of inflation. So people have to put their money somewhere. And so you're obsessed that the United States is driving off a financial cliff, Kip, and has nothing to do with reality, right? Somehow this is meeting a psychological need on your part. The American economy is far better off than any of the major competing economies. And people have to put their money someplace in this world. Now, you may live in a fantasy world where nations only behave as you would wish them to. You may be disturbed that the universe does not operate according to your dictates. But what you're commenting on has absolutely nothing to do with reality. It's all about you set up some kind of psychological reward system that the present world is nothing but crap. But we only live in this world right now, right here. And in this world right now and right here, the United States is stronger economically and militarily than any of its rivals. And as each month goes by, it is getting stronger. And the gap between the U.S. economy and the Chinese and the Japanese and the Russian and the German economy is getting bigger and bigger. Right? The United States economy is in far better shape vis-a-vis the rest of the world than it was 20 years ago. So this American economy falling off a cliff exists only in your mind. Right? Out in the real world, the American economy is outstripping all other major competing economies. And you may say, that may be true in this world, but in my fantasy world, in my fantasy universe, right, the American economy would be damaged for doing this, but that exists only in your fantasy. In this world, the American economy and American strength, both economic, cultural, and military, is consistently outgaining that of all competing powers and becoming more so. All right, over the next 50 years, according to everything we know right now, the United States will be more powerful, more dominant in the world than it even is right now.
Media era thing. And, you know, if these end up going badly for the Senate, you could have a kind of return to the, this is all crap. No one answers any serious questions. They're just going to go up and down. We'll just have a partisan vote.
The nominees go meet with the senators like they do individually.
And Kip says, I'm looking for a haven to get out of dollars. I don't trust Bitcoin. I've got enough gold. Inflation is eating away at me, no matter what 40 says otherwise. Well, store not up treasure on earth where moth can corrupt and thief can break in and steal. The best place that you should be investing is with your community, with your family, your extended family, and your friends. That's where you should be investing. Invest in your family, your friends, your community. If you don't have a community, find a community. Invest in a community. Your community will invest in you. You will never be able to see reality as clearly as when you are thinking socially, you are thinking with regard to your community. Right? Your community will have far better ideas for where you should be investing your dollars than you will come up with on your own. Your community will see challenges, obstacles, and opportunities far more clearly than you ever will on your own. Best investment you can make.
And then, right.
And then there's just a vote because it's not going to serve anybody's purpose. Like the people who are like the grilling of Hegseth, for example, like Elizabeth Warren came out looking like a fool. It's not helpful to her to look the way Hegseth just like knocked it out of the park.
I'm sorry, but those memes that were going around of all those screaming
Maisie Hirono yelling at him, Warren yelling at him, you know, Klobuchar yelling at him. I know it was Anyway, okay, so Trump's nominees are all apparently going to sail through. I mean, the weird thing is that there's a momentum effect, right?
So it's pleasing that the Trump administration at least seems to have some expertise with getting their nominees through. I can't stand many of the nominees, but I give them credit for getting them through.
Are you willing to support our veterans organizations that will help our veterans get every damn thing that they deserve because they signed on the dotted line to keep us safe, just like are you willing to support our veterans organizations that will help our veterans get every damn thing that they deserve?
Okay, that's awesome.
Because I know Tulsi Gabbard is still highly controversial. But, if you have this thing where everybody is kind of, the boulder is rolling down the hill, and the path of least resistance for 53 Republican senators is just to vote to confirm and then deal with the consequences afterwards. Maybe it'll end up 50-50 and Vance will break the tie in the Gabbard case. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really seen.
I mean, she's still doing her meetings. There's, there's a lot we'll learn before the hearing.
Yeah. By the way, John Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director, who also had his hearing yesterday, did something I thought was pretty interesting. Again, in the combat, he was like, I was the guy who said that the virus came from a lab. I'm one of these people that I was the director of national intelligence, and people were trying to suppress me from having my views put out on social media during the year 2020. And I was a senior official in the United States government. So don't be talking to me about what disinformation is.
By the way, that's another irony of the Biden speech, just to jump right back there. He's going to talk about the disinformation and misinformation on social media platforms. The guy who suppressed the story about him and his son. Give me a break.
Right.
Fair enough.
Anyway.
All right. Let's get to the main event. Hostage deal, ceasefire deal. Dan, you are as well-informed a person as exists in the United States about these things. One thing to be said, I don't think it's going to derail it, is that the Netanyahu's office last night issued a statement saying, we have not fully agreed to this deal. Hamas is playing games. After the announcement that the deal had been reached, Hamas is now playing games with the terms and details of the deal, and I am not yet ready to bring it to the Israeli full cabinet for a vote. Is that?
Yeah,
do I have that right?
It seems to me, and obviously it's a little foggy right now in terms of what's happening, but there seems to be two holdups. One is, so they agree on the number of prisoners, of Palestinian prisoners, that will be released from Israeli prisons, but Israel has a veto. So Hamas, the way this works, and the same way it worked last time too in November of 23, is Hamas provides a list of the people it wants released, and as part of the deal, Israel has a veto. So we can look. So if like a Yehya Sinwar type, appears on the list, Israel can say, no way, that person isn't being released. And so Israel can exercise its veto. A. B. Israel wanted, as part of the deal, that some of the prisoners who are serving like multiple life sentences, and that if they're going to be released, they're released at the very end of the process, not at the beginning. And so, meaning they want to save those prisoners for perhaps at some point, if Israel, not in this phase, gets these young Israeli soldiers who are being held hostage out of Gaza. And my understanding is Hamas has been trying to front load some of those folks.
So I don't have any strong opinion on this hostage deal. I guess my inclination would be to be skeptical of it. I hate Israel releasing 50 terrorists for every hostage they get back. But thanks to the Alexander technique, it's a lot easier for me to let go of a need to have a strong opinion, right? I can just be in observance mode rather than judgment mode. Just noticing rather than proclaiming judgment. When I feel more ease with myself, I don't have to come to these strong, definitive views about the world around me. I can simply be in a mode of awareness rather than judgment. And most of the time, we are going to function more effectively, more gracefully, if we are in this mode of awareness rather than the mode of judgment.
So there's a dust up over which Palestinian prisoners are going to be released. By the way, this has happened in the past, so this doesn't surprise me, and I think these things get worked out. The second issue is under the deal, and I don't know how granular you want to get at the deal, but it's a 42-day ceasefire, and then the hope is, I think it's unrealistic, but the hope is then they go to phase 2 of the deal, and Smotrich is arguing he wants a commitment.
Bezalel Smotrich. He is one of the two furthest right-wing members of the BB coalition, has 8 seats. If he were to pull out of the government would fall.
Yeah.
And Kip says, it's a sad day when a man can't keep dollars because he can't trust his own government not to devalue the currency. Home prices are up 150 times since 1940. There's absolutely nothing about that should make you sad. You have more freedom than 99% of people on Earth, right? You have more opportunities than 99% of people on Earth. You have more prosperity than 99% of people on Earth. You are so blessed living in the United States of America. The United States of America has been so good to you. It has provided you so many opportunities, right? you are so incredibly secure living in the United States of America, and you're complaining that the United States government does not live up to your ideals of fiscal management when you are in the freest, strongest, most prosperous nation that has ever existed in world history. Right? How does someone who lives in the freest, strongest, most prosperous nation in world history complain? Right? Because there's some payoff to you that the world is dissatisfying to you, that the universe is not operating according to your dictates, and therefore you are more than justified in withdrawing from it. But this has absolutely nothing to do with the United States of America and its economic policy. Right? To live in the freest, most prosperous, most secure nation that has ever existed in human history, and to be filled with complaints about how terrible things are, right? That is some maladaptive physiological, psychological necessity that you have operating in you to be miserable. And it has nothing to do with the United States of America and its fiscal policy. Right? You're getting a payoff from distorting reality. You've had such a blessed, free, prosperous, and safe life that's been bestowed upon you by this country, and you are full of complaints about this country.
Maybe, although Yair Lapid, the head of the opposition, said that he would direct the opposition to approve the deal.
The point is, Ben-Gvir is saying he's threatening to pull out in some form. So, but he can't do it alone. He needs Smotrich to do it with him. Smotrich is also the finance minister, I should say. So he's got a pretty big job in the government. If both of them pull out, then it poses a real threat to Netanyahu's government. Smotrich wants a commitment from Netanyahu that after phase one, Israel goes back to war, full stop.
Okay, it's not the universe I don't trust, says Kip. It's the United States government. Okay, but you need to put your money somewhere. So who do you trust more than the U.S. Treasury bond? Right, do you trust the government in Afghanistan, perhaps North Korea, China, Russia? Right, the U.S. government operates the strongest, safest, most powerful nation that has ever existed in world history. The US dollar, right, vis-a-vis most currencies in the world, has been getting stronger. Like, where do you think salvation rests? Do you think it rests in Bitcoin or in gold or investing in South Korean real estate? If you knew the direction of the US dollar, you would be incredibly rich right now, right? Neither you or I has any idea where the US dollar is going, right? So complaining that you can't trust the United States and its strong dollar or weak dollar policy, well, you can't trust yourself. You have no idea how you are going to react tomorrow. You can't trust other people, right? We are not predictable. Human beings are not 100% predictable. So you're complaining about a world outside of you that does not live up to your dictates, rather than looking at yourself and recognizing how you are not living up to your own ideals. Right? It has nothing to do with the U.S. government. There are no guarantees in life. Right? There's no obvious sure bet on where to put our money. We live in a world of uncertainty, unpredictability. We live in a world where we are vulnerable. The outside world is a far more dangerous place than we like to think about consciously. But overall, given what we know, if you live in the United States of America, you are blessed to live in a prosperous, free, and powerful nation.
That there is no transitioning to quote unquote phase two of the ceasefire. And now, anyway, so he wants that commitment. And so there's some last minute negotiations with Smotrich about, how much Netanyahu commits to that. I should say in the deal that they reached in November of 23,
when 80 hostages were released over 7 days.
Right.
Okay, Kip says, what country can't do better than the United States with its financial system? Okay, start naming them. Name them. Tell me, is it Nigeria you think that's really got it going on with its fiscal system? There are states that run at a budget surplus. So do you want to live there? Which states do you want us to emulate? Like, which nation states do you think really know what they're doing and are on a powerful trajectory? The dollar is worth less this decade, just like it's been worth less every decade since the 1950s. Coke cost 5 cents from the 1880s until the 1950s. No inflation. That is meaningless unless you say the dollar is worth less compared to what, right? Everything is in comparison to what? So you're telling me that every nation can do better than the United States? So Singapore, okay, you think life is great in Singapore. You think that they really have their economy on a terrific trajectory. Then invest in then you've answered your own question. Yep. All right, go invest every spare dollar you have in the currency of the Singapore nation state. Right? You've answered your own question. You think things are just so much better with the Singapore economy. So go invest in that currency.
One of the holdups within the cabinet, similar to this situation, actually, one of the holdups inside the cabinet is many ministers did not believe that Israel would go back to the war after the 8 days, that by pausing for 8 days, Israel is basically stopping the war. And in the intra-cabinet debates, they made clear, Ron Dermer in particular, made clear to the
Ron Dermer is the senior advisor, like Bibi's closest.
Yeah, he's his alter ego
advisor. Yeah,
and he's the minister of strategic.
Was it cheap? Right. Anyone can say, oh, Singapore, that economy is far better than the U.S. People who run Singapore, they are far smarter and wiser than the people who run America. But was it cheap? How much money have you invested in the Singapore currency? I would suspect you've invested very little, if not none at all, Kip. So saying that Singapore has it going on economically, and yet you haven't invested anything in its currency, indicates that you're just saying cheap words, all right? What you truly believe is indicated by where you put your money. So have you placed your money primarily in overseas currencies, in overseas stock markets, in overseas investments? If you have not, then for all your talk about how bad things are in the United States, you are still primarily invested in the United States. You complain about the United States, and yet you are overwhelmingly invested in the United States because in the real world, you see that investing in America is a better bet than investing in Singapore.
Affairs. He argued we can and we will most likely go back to war after 8 days. Just because we pause for 8 days doesn't mean we can't resume. And so it's a similar dynamic now, although I think Smotrich is basically arguing 8 days is one thing, 42 is another. If we stop fighting for 42 days, the war is over. And I want to know the war is not over. And so, now the problem is if Bibi says that explicitly and that's public, that is going to put off some of the other parties in these negotiations. So anyways, these are these last minute hiccups. I would be surprised. I would really be surprised if we don't see the first 3 female hostages.
So sometimes life doesn't go the way we expected, and it's a beautiful quality to be able to recognize how good you've got it without denying your pain and expressing some gratitude, such as singing a 12th century Latin hymn. This is a Christian family in the Pacific Palisades. Their home burned down, and yet they're still finding time to praise God. You know where this family invests? You know how they hedge against vulnerability and inflation and the possibility of a depreciating dollar? They invest in each other. It's a good way to go.